This is Ulnaby Hall Farm in County Durham, and we've been invited here to explore the village that surrounds it, or rather mysteriously doesn't. Because at some point in time, Ulnaby village was deserted and almost completely vanished. Almost because this field contains the remains of the village. In fact, it's an absolute maze of mounds. Look at this photo. You can see homes, gardens, streets, absolutely acres of archaeology to dig. So will this field give us a window into the world of the medieval peasant? The life that you or I would have lived in the Middle Ages? Well, that's our challenge. To tell the story not just of one house or a chapel or the manor, but of the whole village. Ulnaby Hall Farm lies near Darlington in County Durham. Today, its 17th century farmhouse is surrounded by fields of grazing cattle and freezing archaeologists. But it's what lies beneath those fields that's got Mick champing at the bit. I don't think I've ever seen a field with so many lumps in it.
It's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? I cut my teeth on sites like this. It's so well preserved.
There is one thing that worries me, though. This is a big field. We've got 3 days. It's a whole village. How do we know what to target?
Well, we can pick certain bits of it that I think that'll answer certain questions, like, you know, what's the origin of the village? When did it first start here? What did it look like when it was flourishing? And, of course, why did it disappear? You should be able to learn all of that.
Stuart, I think we're going to need you to start us off.
It's great, isn't it, this site? Earthworks at last.
I knew he'd like that.
Well, we're really lucky on this site because last year English Heritage undertook a really detailed, carefully measured survey of all the lumps and bumps on this site.
Can you tell what this stuff is, though? Because to me, it just looks like a bloke's face who needs a shave.
You'll see in all these lumps and bumps, you can see patterns of things starting to emerge. You can see straight lines down there. You can see regular divisions of things. These are patterns that we can recognise.
So as far as you're concerned, we don't really need to bother to dig it at all, do we?
I mean, realistically, the one thing we don't have is date.
Yeah. Is this all going to be about foundations? I want to know about the people.
Well, there will be foundations because we can see the outlines of buildings, but we know out at the back of the houses we're going to get rubbish pits and dung heaps and stuff where we get pottery, animal bone, food remains, and that's what will tell us about the daily life of the villagers.
Unusually for Time Team, we seem to know a lot about the site before we've even started digging. To Mick and Stuart's expert eyes, these lumps are clearly the remains of collapsed walls and reveal a road, a village green and individual house plots. But what we don't have are any dates for the village, or indeed any evidence of the people who lived in it. So we're starting with 2 house plots Stuart's identified on the edge of the green and geophysics them to see if we can pick up any rubbish pits or other signs of occupation. And it doesn't take long before John thinks he's identified a house.
But that black, you say, is a building?
Yes, but not a stone building, I don't think. There's no indication of clear wall lines as such.
I think you may be looking at sort of mud walls or something of that sort of order.
But you see, the value of these geophysics, they may not show very much, but if we are dealing with mud walls and clay walls, at least it gives us an indication of what we're going to be looking for. It's going to be a lot more difficult to find than stone walls, but I find this very, very valuable information.
I'm sure you'll manage.
So the archaeologists take up residence digging our first trench, bang on top of the building John's identified on the geophys. And while they're searching for dating evidence in the ground, we're also turning to a wealth of local documents for other clues. What's the earliest reference we've got to Ulnaby?
Well, it's not exactly a reference, but it's the place name. That BY ending is a Norse term for a farmstead, so that name would have been coined probably at the end of the 9th or the early 10th century.
So does that mean we're looking at a Viking village?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it could be, but, you know, this name was coined for a settlement somewhere in the vicinity, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that it refers to the settlement that we're digging.
So when do we know that it was established as a village?
Well, the first reference we've got is from 1198, when one William Greystoke was obliged to provide a knight, or the equivalent amount of money, in service to the bishops of Durham in return for holding land at Coniscliffe and at Ulnaby.
So does that mean that there was definitely a village here in the 12th century?
No, it means that there was a manor here in the 12th century. Now, whether or not there's a village, well, we're going to have to dig to find that out.
History Hit is an award-winning streaming platform built by history fans for history fans. Enjoy our rich library of documentaries covering key events and locations of the medieval period. History Hit's medieval offering features leading historians such as Dan Jones, Eleanor Janega and Kat Jarman. Not only that, but we've a rich library of audio documentaries covering every period of history through our network of podcasts. Sign up now for a free trial, and Chronicle fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Chronicle at checkout.
So, back to the trench, and Phil's hunt for the house, which we think will be made of turf. But then again, maybe not.
Matt?
Hello?
Have a look at this. Now, John promised me there'd be no stone in here.
So you've won your £5 already?
Well, I don't know.
11 o'clock day one, and it looks as though we might have our first archaeological hint of a house. But although we've barely scratched the surface of this target, it seems Mick's already switched his attention to something else. It's only about 5 minutes ago that we started putting in this trench, but this being Time Team, over here you can see the strings down, there's people bouncing up and down trying to do some deturfing. It's the second trench, isn't it?
It is indeed,
But
yeah.
why? And why so close to that one?
Well, when you look at these plans, there are almost certainly different phases of development of the village here.
What do you mean different phases?
Well, if you go in a village today, you'll have, Georgian houses in one place, Tudor houses in another place. The place has developed gradually. It's developed over a period. This is almost certainly the same. From the look of the earthworks, we think that area over there might be earlier. So that's why that trench has gone in. And we think this is part of a row of farms.
So you think this might be later?
At the moment, I think I'd put a cheap bottle of wine on that, yeah.
You chuck your money about, don't you? Before Mick starts getting the drinks in, we've got a lot more digging to do. And our second trench has gone in over another possible house platform. Mick and Stuart think that this second house is later than Phil's house. Their theory being Phil's digging a possible house which forms part of this plot. They believe that his is the earliest dwelling in the village. They think this because it's cut through by a bank which forms the front boundary of the second plot. They're incredibly confident about their interpretation of these lumps and bumps. Personally, I'd err on the side of caution until we get some dates, but Mick's in a pretty persuasive mood.
It's so regular and loud, I think it must be planned.
So who would have planned it?
Well, probably the lord of the manor at the time.
So would there have been a model, some kind of template they'd have worked from?
Well, if I draw you a little sketch, look. If you take that earthwork plan, we've got a big rectangular open space in the middle, which is the village green. That is the space between a couple of rows of plots, which are where the medieval farmers had their farmsteads. Each of those would have had a farmhouse on it. I've only drawn one building on because at the time that a village like this was occupied, everything took place in one building. So you go through the door, and if you're human, you turn left. If you're not, you turn right into the cattle end.
Yeah.
I mean, that combined with their diet must mean that it was an extremely smelly place to live in.
It may have been smelly in the medieval period, but there's a whiff of excitement on site right now as Phil's trench is full of surprises.
God, that looks good, Phil. You've got lots of stuff there.
But don't be misled.
Go on.
Those are not stones.
Oh, go on.
No, they're not.
Who's told you that?
Well, John did. He said,
right.
whatever you do, when you dig here, you will not find stones. This should be the acid test. Now, you know what a stone sounds like.
I think so, yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
that's not a stone, is it?
That's soft archaeology, Phil.
Is that right?
That's what Stuart said.
Everything was going to be totally clay like an earthen. Now, do you really want to know what's there?
Yes.
Well, looks like a stone wall there. Really? Yes.
Are you listening, John?
So not exactly what Stuart predicted from the earthworks survey. But I've got to admit it looks like we might have our first hint of a house on this site. Over in Trench 2, it seems that the archaeology is equally well preserved, and we're also beginning to find walls. But we're going to need more than a few stones to reveal Ulnaby's story and the lives of its peasants. All the archaeologists are talking about are foundations and building platforms, but there's no sign of any villagers. Are you having the same problem with the documents?
Well, yeah, I mean, most of the documents refer to the Lord and his properties, but this one's a little bit more interesting. This is a will from 1320 of Marmaduke Fitzjohn. He lists the produce that's owed by the peasants to the Lord, and this includes wheat and oats and barley, and they also have to provide tables and chests and pails and so on and so forth. So it gives us an insight into what the peasants would be doing during their daily lives and how to render to the Lord.
By picking out snippets of information from our documents, we're beginning to glimpse the agricultural lifestyle of our medieval peasants. But we really need solid evidence in the ground to tell the story of Ulnaby and its villagers. And having left the archaeologists alone in the cold for 1 minute, they've begun to open a third trench. Yet another trench. We've gone trench crazy today. Is this your doing?
Might have something to do with it, yes.
Why? Why are we putting a trench in here?
Well, you see these regular divisions of things along here. They have a certain space element to them, like with a house and a garden around it, effectively. And what's interesting here is that one of these regular divisions appears to be subdivided. And what we've got is a building right on the end of it. So is this one of the last cottages in this medieval village? So that's what we want to examine here.
John, geophys is a bit redundant this time, isn't
No,
it?
it's not. We've actually surveyed this magnetically now, and we're getting some really nice results. We're getting lots of strong anomalies. They reflect the buildings, the yards, areas of burning, rubbish pits and so on. And Stuart talked about this rectangular building. It's difficult to see on this plot because I've only just produced it, but look, there's very strong anomalies there, and they're right at this end of the building. It's just possible we've either got a large pit there or maybe a fireplace.
So, Trench 3's going in here because Stuart thinks the subdivision of this plot suggests even later occupation. The archaeologists now hope that Trench 1 should give us the beginning of the village, Trench 2 the middle, and Trench 3 its end. I'm still amazed by their confidence, since we've hardly found any dating evidence at all yet. In Trench 2, we've added a floor surface to the wall bridge exposed, but at the moment the finds are a bit thin on the ground.
We have got two little pieces here with the very shiny brown glaze, which are definitely, 18th century or later.
Quite typical of what you'd find in the topsoil kicking around the site.
Mixed up, yeah.
Over in Trench 1, Phil might have saved the day with a curious object he thinks belonged to one of our villagers.
It's a piece of work bone. Oh. You see, along here, you can see this edge here is really, really sharp. There's a snapped edge.
Yeah.
But if you look at this, you can see that both sides are actually tapering up. It's sort of like an arch shape. And when you look around here, you can see all these edges here are totally smoothed off. So that is a deliberate shaping of that piece of bone. But looking at it, you can't help but feeling you want to sort of like taper a little handle, like a little spoon. But unquestionably, this is the sort of, to me, everyday item I think everybody would have had.
So at last, a real possession from a real medieval peasant. But before we get too excited, Stuart now thinks there's much more to this site than we first thought, and this trackway is the key.
This is clearly an old road, this hollow road we're walking down, isn't it?
It is, and as you can see, this is clearly a well-developed hollow way. It's been used over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It sort of heads towards that ploughed field over there.
Yeah.
And it's not a cul-de-sac, clearly this depth of roadway. And it's just possible we have properties coming along this roadway and disappeared into that field.
So, nearly the end of day one, and our site might just have doubled in size. If that road continued into the next field, it's likely the village did as well. But we'll have to worry about that tomorrow. And apart from geophysics the area, we're keeping focused on the lumps and bumps in this field. In our newly opened Trench 3, we're already starting to uncover some fairly solid stonework, but it's too soon to tell whether it forms some part of a building. But in Trench 2, it looks like Bridges' house is shaping up nicely. That's a nice looking wall.
You might think so, Tony. But actually what I think you're looking at is something like a revetment.
Why would you put up a revetment here?
Well, revetment would be used to protect the building that I'm standing in here. And you've got a fairly flimsy building made of timber here. You may want to keep it safe if this is particularly damp. So let's make a nice, strong superstructure and keep your health safe.
But you're assuming that there is a property here?
Well, definitely. I'm sure there's a property here because if you look behind me, just down here you can see these big stones.
Cool, they're great.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like flag flooring inside.
Any finds?
Yeah, there is. There's a really nice piece of 13th century pottery. It's a rim and it's from a large jar. Really, really nice diagnostic piece.
So, in the last hour of the day, we've got some real archaeology that dates the village back to the 1200s. It's been a really busy day. We've put in 3 trenches. As you can see, we're just getting down on top of the medieval village. But of course, we don't know how it all links together yet. And there's no reason to assume that the village stops at that fence line. So tomorrow, we're going to go down this little road, what's known as the Hollow Way, to see what's on the other side. Beginning of day 2 here at Ulnaby Hall Farm in County Durham, where we're investigating the lost medieval village, which we're pretty sure lies underneath this field. Yesterday we put in a trench here because Stuart reckons that this earthwork represents one of the earliest buildings on the site, although he didn't think that it was made of stone. Phil, was he right?
I think he's wrong on both counts, actually. Firstly, we've got no evidence of a building here at the moment. And secondly, we do have stone. Now that stone, I think, is a much later wall, probably just a spread of material. But the crucial thing is we've got no evidence of a building at all. True, we've got a few bits of medieval pottery, but we're in the middle of a medieval village. You'd expect that. So what we're going to have to do is going to be a bit more brutal. We're going to take the digger to it and go down.
Stuart's been walking these hills for 40 years. He knows them like the back of his hand. It's going to be great telling him he was wrong.
First time for everything.
Not the most encouraging start to the day, but when the archaeology gets tough, the archaeologists get tougher. So Phil gets stuck in with the big digger to shift the dirt and see whether there's any evidence of occupation in his trench. So far, we've opened 3 trenches based on Stuart's interpretation of all the lumps and bumps in the field. Although Phil's struggling to find anything in his trench, we still think it's located on the site of an early house platform. We think Bridges' trench is located on a later house, and the third's on one of the last houses in the village. If we're right, we're hoping to reveal the history of the village from beginning to end. It's a big challenge, especially in this biting cold. And it might get even bigger since we think the road extended into the next field and the village continued with it. Although the field's been heavily ploughed, geophys should reveal whether or not it did.
I can't actually see it on the geophysics. I suspect it must have been ploughed out. I mean, there's no doubt that it came through this field.
Yeah. Can you see anything at all that we ought to dig a hole in with the machine?
Well, to be honest, no. I mean, compare the results from here.
Yeah.
It's full of sort of burnt features, rubbish pits and so on within the village.
Yeah.
Once you move beyond that field boundary, no evidence of settlement as far as I'm concerned.
OK, well, that's so well preserved, we've got enough work in there. Let's not do anything in here on the basis the geophysics doesn't show anything and concentrate in the main field.
Yeah.
For once, I'm quite relieved there's nothing here. We now know the full extent of the village and can concentrate our efforts on the lumps and bumps. And in Trench 3, we're beginning to uncover some pretty large chunks of masonry, possibly another medieval house. But Stuart still doesn't think we've tackled the whole village yet.
This hollow way that runs through here that we're standing in, if you look on the other side, there's lots of earthworks on that side as well, this area highlighted in pink. There's a whole series of little strips down here with what appear to be some buildings inside them. And it's very higgledy-piggledy and very different to this very organised stuff up here.
It doesn't look as regular, the earthworks aren't as good, and there's obviously got to be some reason for that. It's not like that. And that's one reason for doing the trench.
Yeah. I'm not madly confident given your track record so far, Stuart. You know...
To clarify that, young man.
Yeah. Can you see that trench through there?
Yeah.
That was the one where you said there would be a building platform and no stone. There's no building platform and lots of stone.
Right.
So, giving Stuart the benefit of the doubt for the moment, we're opening a fourth trench to see what's going on to the south of the road. The house platforms on this side seem to be less regular than the others, and we're hoping our trench will reveal how they fit in with the rest of the village. And shock horror, over in our first trench, Phil might actually have found some archaeology.
Whoa! Look. I think that's a bit of that coal stuff again. I think we got a bit of a feature here.
While this might be our first hint of that elusive early house, over in Bridges Trench, we're uncovering a whole floor plan.
Naomi, how's the back of this building shaping up?
Well, it's coming along quite nicely, Bridget. As you can see, we've got these 3 quite large stones in the centre.
These ones just in front of me here?
Yeah, and it's kind of occurred to me that it looks like a face.
Well, it does. I was just thinking the same thing, that they all are absolutely in a straight line there. And that is parallel with the stones that I've got up there that are marking where the front wall of the building would have been.
So we might have both the front and back walls of the house. And they're not the only walls appearing on the side.
You can almost see a line there.
Yeah, straight line across
and
there,
they seem to be faced.
It looks like we've uncovered 2 of the houses in the village, and what's more, Rakshaw's also got some signs of occupation in hers.
We've actually found quite a lot of slag from, metalworking. This is the waste product from metalworking.
Yeah. So this is what's giving the geophysics signal then?
Yeah. So the question is, is there some kind of furnace here? Is there any, suggestion of, industrial activity?
So that's really quite exciting. You might have a medieval building and some medieval industrial activity. That'd be really interesting.
Until now, we've mainly found rubble and stone, but this slag might be our first hint of what the villagers were actually doing in medieval Ulnaby, which would be great because so far the archaeology has not given much away about the lives of the villagers. But we do have a document which might help us, the Luttrell Psalter. The 14th century Psalter was commissioned by a Lincolnshire lord, Sir Geoffrey Luttrell. While primarily a book of psalms, its illustrations paint a vivid picture of medieval peasant life.
Not only has Sir Geoffrey had himself and his family depicted, but all those who worked his land, including the peasants who worked his fields for him. You kick off with the ploughman, and then we go to the sower and the seed. And here we've got reaping.
It's all work, Dawn. Didn't they have any fun?
Well, no, it was hard work, but there are some fantastic images in the Luttrell Psalter of participation in games and engaging in sporting endeavours. And it's a fantastic one. This man here his friends are holding a pole, and he's either limbo dancing underneath it, or it's some sort of weightlifting competition that he's engaged in.
And here you've got the age-old pursuit of foot wrestling. And here you can see how your potsherds got broken.
Cool. When you see those in the trench, you don't actually think of how they might have been broken, do you?
And here, for example, a naked blue man sitting on a pole holding a pig's bladder as a balloon.
Good old-fashioned entertainment.
What more could you want?
Back at the site, Phil could do with some entertainment because he's dug himself into a cold, dark hole.
Once we get back here, there's absolutely nothing in the way of archaeology. There's no pot, there's no bone, there's absolutely nothing.
Phil's feature seems to have mysteriously disappeared. It's equally bleak in our fourth trench, where Matt's uncovered something, but not what we expected.
Matt, what you got? I've got something that you might be a bit disappointed in here. Pipe stem.
Tobacco pipe stem, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's not medieval, is it?
Can't possibly be, no.
Well, I hope that doesn't really home too many implications for this building.
Matt's finding 17th century pipe here, not exactly fitting in with the picture of medieval Ulnaby we're building up on the rest of the site. What's more, in Phil's trench, we're now fairly positive there's absolutely nothing there, which isn't what I was promised yesterday. I don't understand what's going on. It's kind of fun that Stuart's theory has been shot out of the water, but on the other hand, I can see there is a zonking great earthwork here. There are other great big earthworks all around it. So what's going on?
Perhaps the buildings and structures that went with those were far more ephemeral, built of timber or something like that, and we just don't see them in sections in a trench like this.
Oh, come on, Mick. I mean, if there'd have been post holes here, I'd have seen them. If there'd have been beam slots here, I'd have been seeing them when we machined up. If there'd have been stone foundations, I would have seen them. Look, I'm not disputing that there's earthworks here. What I'm doubtful about is the interpretation of those earthworks.
And what else could they be?
Well, they could be hedgerows, property boundaries. They don't have to be buildings.
Well, at least one thing's becoming very clear. Archaeology is all about the interpretation, with some considered calm debate thrown in.
I mean, I agree with you, that's what the earthworks look like, but when we dig a hole in it, there's nothing there.
But you're interpreting that as a building.
Yeah, what we've got here, you can see them, there's high bits and there's low bits. We thought we'd put a trench here because we thought there might be a structure here of some kind. There might be a structure here of some kind.
Look then, all right, if there wasn't a structure there, can you tell me why you asked me to put a trench on a high part, whereas with everywhere else on the site, when we've been looking for buildings, we've been digging up the holes in the lower parts, in the basal hollows. Yeah, in the hollows.
Yeah, but the hollows are defined by higher parts that define the edges around them.
We should be digging in a hollow.
I hate to take sides, but at the moment I put it as field archaeologists 1, landscape investigators 0. Sometimes the landscape can be a lonely place. But in Trench 3, we've discovered the walls which Stuart had predicted in the earthworks, and he's confident he can level up the scores.
That looks interesting, Raksha.
I know. It's suddenly emerging. We've got this wall running along the trench, but I haven't got a clue where we are in the building.
I've got a clue. This is great, because you're on the gable end wall of a medieval longhouse that goes up that way.
Ah.
Let me show you. That's the inside. That's outside there. Runs along here, and then it turns around where this bank comes along up here and back, right the way down. I'm getting too old for this. Right the way down here. It's a classic sort of medieval longhouse.
So Stuart's back on course with his medieval longhouse, and having studied the earthworks, he also thinks this was one of the last houses to be built in the village. On the other side of the site, we've been trying to discover Ulnaby's origins, and although there was no sign of an early house in Phil's trench, he's determined to keep searching, this time in a hollow. Bridge and Raksha's buildings were found in hollows, so he's hoping to have more success. But to tell the whole story of Ulnaby, we now really need dates and finds, not just foundations. And in Bridge's trench, we might finally have got somewhere.
It looks like a knife blade.
Why do you say that?
Well, can you see this side here? This looks like a blade coming along here. And then it comes up in this angle, and that's called the tang. And that's where the handle would have been fitted, and probably made of wood because it no longer exists.
I know you haven't had a chance to clean it up yet, but any kind of date?
Well, given that it's got a slight curving nature to it, can you see that?
Yeah.
Well, that's very typical of medieval knives. But I think the most interesting thing is its position of where it's been found.
What, you mean on top of those flags?
Absolutely.
Why is that significant?
Well, in amongst it, we found a lot of pottery that has all been dated to the 13th, 14th centuries. This is a really good occupation layer. It really is evidence of those last people that lived in this building.
Not only a great personal find, but we've now got a solid date for when this house went out of use. It's only one building, but one of the main goals on this site is trying to find out when and why this village was deserted. And if this happened in the 14th century, its demise fits in perfectly with one of the most catastrophic events in British history. Most deserted medieval villages were because of the Black Death, weren't they?
Well, that's what we tend to think, you know. I mean, what's the great catastrophe in the Middle Ages? 1348, 1349, the Black Death arrives, kills between a third and a half of the population. So when people found deserted village sites, they thought, oh, well, that must be the reason. But actually, there are very few of them that are actually depopulated by the Black Death. People that are left have got to carry on living, and very few villages are cleared out by it.
So why did so many medieval villages collapse?
The other big reason is a change of farming, particularly in the 15th and 16th centuries, where we hear, for example, of people being evicted from villages, when landlords are turning the village over from an arable farming estate, growing lots of crops, which needs a big labour force, to going over to sheep and cattle, where you only need a couple of stockmen or a couple of shepherds, so you get rid of the rest of the population.
Before we can really speculate what caused Ulnaby's desertion, we've got to find dating evidence across the whole site, not just one house. So nearly the end of day 2, and everyone's digging like mad. Over in Matt's trench, we're now beginning to expose walls and a gravel floor surface. What's more, he's got some dating evidence for it.
Date for a bit of that pot, please.
OK. Well, very well be 14th century here, yeah?
Oh, right.
So yet another medieval date for the village. And over in Phil's second trench, even he might have some archaeology.
How you getting on, Phil?
Oh, this is a lot more promising than that first trench you had me in. When we got all these stone here, look, this far more looks like building material to me. There's that sort of chalky, mortar-y stuff. We've got vines coming up. This is a lot more promising.
With real archaeology in sight, Phil's a happy man again. But as the archaeology takes a turn for the better, the weather's taken a turn for the worse. As all the trenches become mud baths, it's time to call it a day. Tough old day today. Did we achieve much?
Oh, my goodness, of course we did. I mean, we're now into buildings in various parts of the village. We got walls, we got floors. We're actually getting some dating evidence. That's the crucial thing.
What about in your trench?
Well, yeah, I didn't have a very good start with my first trench. That was a bit of a red herring. But now, in this new one, there's some really good, solid archaeology, and I'm sure that's going to come up with some great answers, too.
And tomorrow we're going to be trying to get the very earliest origins of the village, aren't we? But in the meantime, what could be nicer of an evening than going down the tavern and indulging in a bit of medieval foot wrestling? So, seconds out, round 1. Oh, he's gone. You're off. Phil, bring on Phil. Help. Welcome back to County Durham. It's day 3 in our quest for the lost medieval village of Ulnaby, and yesterday was a really frustrating day. It was tantalising, the weather was absolutely dreadful, but although we may not yet have found the origins of the village, in this trench here, it looks like we may be finding the middle and the end of our story. What is it that we've got, Matt?
Well, down that end of the trench, you can see we've got the edge of the hollow way, the stony track there. That's quite late. We had a bit of tobacco pipe off there, so 17th century onwards. As we go up towards the front wall of the building, it's the same story, tobacco pipe everywhere. Modern glass as well, so 18th century onwards, 17th century. And then as you go into the house, the gravel floor, even more tobacco pipe, they're obviously smoking loads. However, underneath that gravel surface, that's where we're getting the earlier pottery. We're getting green glazed pottery, so 13th, 14th century, and it's the same out the back as well, over the back wall, a couple of bits of green glazed pottery.
Apart from the fact that they were smoking like kippers, we don't seem to know very much about what the people who lived here were doing.
Well, that's where I'm pinning my hopes out the back of the house, because out there we had this early pottery, and you know they would have cleaned out their houses, chucked all the rubbish out the back. Hopefully when we get down in there we might find rubbish pits and middens and stuff, which will tell us a bit more about what they were actually doing.
Finally, we're not only getting individual dates for the village, we're starting to chart its development. We've got a 17th century house built on top of earlier 14th century occupation, which is the same date as the house found in Bridges Trench. With only a day to go, we really need to start piecing together all the evidence we've got from across the site. So we're collecting together all the pottery. By comparing the date range, we're hoping to chart the story of the whole village. But there's still a load to do, since we haven't reached the bottom of the trenches yet. Yesterday, Phil opened a second trench, hoping to find evidence of the village's origins. after his first trench proved so disastrous. We've now found a cobbled surface, but we think it's just a cattle yard. So Stuart's dragged a reluctant Phil back to his first trench, where he's convinced he can actually see a post hole. As far as he's concerned, solid evidence of an early house.
What is all this stuff if it isn't something somebody stuck in the ground along the edge of an earthwork platform within a plot?
I'll tell you what, if you had a big stone like that and you hooked it out with a plough and it filled up with dirty soil, you'd get exactly something like that.
Well, I think it's too much of a coincidence. On the edge of this platform, on this platform, and you've got evidence of timber structures in the ground. I'm not
We haven't got timber structures. You might have one post hole.
Despite his protests, I can tell Phil's intrigued, and he's decided to extend the trench to see if there are any further post holes running along the bank. And almost immediately, he's into archaeology.
Bone, well preserved.
We've been finding animal bones among the medieval pottery all over the site, and they're revealing quite a lot about our medieval peasants.
We can tell that they were butchering, eating and cooking these animals. For example, this bone here is quite dark, black, and we can tell that's been burnt. And another really nice piece is part of a cattle vertebrae, and we can see a nice clean butchery mark here, so you can imagine a knife just going straight through it.
Are these the kind of animals you'd have expected us to find?
Yeah, pretty much. If we think about Sir Geoffrey Luttrell and his Salter, we know from his estate in Yorkshire that when it was surveyed, they had, for example, 10 horses, 13 oxen for pulling ploughs, etc., 8 cattle and 3 sheep, and that they owed the Lord 64 chickens worth a penny each at Christmas.
The animal bones and the Luttrell Psalter paint a vivid picture of the agricultural lives of our 14th century peasants. And despite this being a modern farm, we've also got evidence of medieval ploughing perfectly preserved in rows of ridge and furrow in the surrounding fields. Mick's keen to experience how they work these fields, and he's called in experimental archaeologists to find out.
Wow, look at this then, Ian. You haven't seen this in one of your fields.
No, not for a long time.
That's brilliant, that is.
Well, this is as close a representation as we could have actually got to the plough that was illustrated in the Luttrell Psalter.
So it's a replica of a 14th century medieval plough.
That's right.
Fantastic.
It's very, very similar to a modern plough. Works very much in the same sort of way. We've got the vertical cutting blade, the coulter.
Yeah.
And behind it, we've got the share, and that cuts on the horizontal.
So that's cutting that way, and that's cutting that way.
That's right.
Right.
And that pushes the soil, cuts the soil, and as the plough comes forward, this component, the moulboard, turns the earth over to form the ridge against the furrow.
So do you think these things could have created the ridge and furrow, these plough ridges that we see in the fields then?
I think it's quite possible they could have done. It's the continual use of the same pattern of land, ploughed and ploughed and ploughed again, following the same furrows along and creating those ridges. OK, ready when you are, Pete.
Right, together, lads.
If you'd like to learn more about the lives of medieval peasants, log on to the Time Team website. As we attempt to understand more about medieval ploughing and put our replica medieval plough to the test, it's now middle of day 3, and the site's become a hive of activity. Over in Bridges Trench, she's found a coin.
It's in great condition.
Oh, wow, it is, isn't it?
I can't read the date, but if you look at it, you can actually see around the outside of it, you can see some lettering coming up.
Oh, yeah, yes, can.
It actually dates from the reign of Edward I in the 14th century and fits in perfectly with the 14th century pottery and knife that Bridge found earlier. Matt's perseverance has also paid off, and he's uncovered a medieval quernstone reused in his 17th century wall.
Right, so there should be a kind of slightly concave, smooth surface on the other side.
On the underside, that's right. That's pretty good.
This would have been used to grind the cereal which the villagers harvested. But while individual finds are great, they only give us tiny snapshots of the village. But having collected together all the pottery from across the site, we now think we can build up a complete story. bridge, what strikes me is the enormous amount of green stuff we've got here.
Well, there is. There is a huge amount of lead-glazed ware here, fairly local pottery. The important thing is, and it's been found in all the trenches to date, and it's dated to about the late 13th, 14th century. It really seems as though this community was here at its zenith in that time.
Yeah, because we've got 13th and 14th here, all along here, all down here, here. It's the vast majority of the pottery we've found, isn't it?
That's it. I mean, in Matt's trench and Raksha's trench and my trench, that's what is coming out. That's what the houses seem to be dated to.
But in Raksha's trench, we've got much more modern stuff, the post-medieval.
That's right. It does seem that in about, the 16th, 17th century, there's a redevelopment of the community here.
So we can now date all the houses in our trenches back to the 14th century, placing the village smack bang in the medieval period. But we've been calling this a deserted medieval village, and so it should end in the medieval period, before the end of the 15th century. But our finds suggest it continued for at least another 300 years, and what's more, the documents seem to confirm this later occupation.
In the middle of the 14th century, Ulnaby came into the hands of the Neville family. Now, they're a leading landowning family in this part of the country, and they've got many manors and castles spread across the north. And they held on to Ulnaby until 1570, when Ulnaby was confiscated from the head of the family, Charles, Earl of Westmoreland, for his role in the failed rising of the north on behalf of Mary Queen of Scots against Queen Elizabeth. Various of the villagers were involved in that rising, and I've got a document from 1570 which lists the villagers who were pardoned for their participation in that rising.
Do we have any names?
Absolutely. We've got people like John Eyre, Roland Cotney, John Byrne, William Douthwaite, various members of the Worthy family.
What date is this again?
This is 1570. And the other thing, of course, that's interesting about it is it means there are quite a few people living here in 1570. Yeah. So this is not a deserted medieval village.
So if Ulnaby didn't end in the medieval period, when and why did the village disappear? The Black Death could have decimated the village in the 14th century, but it certainly didn't kill it off. And the villagers obviously weren't evicted in the 15th century. While the archaeologists ponder this conundrum, at least our ploughing experiment has produced some positive results.
Whoa there.
Yeah, that looks better, Neil. You made some improvements, have you?
We've made a few adjustments, Mick.
Yeah, well, I could see it was just gliding through really smooth there.
But we have encountered other problems with
it.
The moldboard on the side.
Yeah.
What's been happening is that the soil has been hitting this central part here.
Right.
And it's been moving over to both sides around the plough.
Right.
Whereas what we want is for it to all kick up onto the right-hand side off the moldboard. So if we can move that a bit further forward, that might just do that.
So it looks as if whoever drew the little picture on the Luttrell Psalter knew about ploughs, but they probably weren't a ploughman. They haven't got it quite accurate.
That seems to be exactly the case. So our intention was to try and recreate the plough exactly as the picture was. So this has worked up to a point.
Yeah.
It's only very small little alterations that we need to make a much more efficient plough.
Although it needs a few adjustments, our replica plough has brought us much closer to the daily lives of our medieval peasants. And it seems to be quite a cold, miserable existence, probably one our archaeologists can identify with. And the coldest, loneliest trench has to be Phil's, where hours of digging has revealed virtually nothing.
Still scratching away there, Phil?
Yeah, no more post holes, Stuart.
What's this then, Phil? Coming this line of stones down here on that alignment?
Well, yeah, that is a line of stones. I don't know what they are.
Well, it's interesting, because it's following the line again of this earthwork bank behind.
Yeah, but this extension was put in to chase this line of post holes, which you told me were there. But I can assure you, there are no more post holes
here. You haven't got to the end of your trench yet, and this is on the same alignment. The post hole up there is that side of it, isn't it? So this might be part of something coming this way. Keep scratching.
Yeah, but I keep scratching. You keep changing your mind.
This must be one of the most frustrating trenches we've ever had on Time Team. First a feature, then no feature. We get fines, and then nothing. But even without a date or any archaeology in the ground, Stuart's sticking to his guns, convinced that these lumps and bumps are the remains of a house plot, and that somewhere within it is one of the earliest buildings in the village. While we've run out of time to test this theory, we've had far more success in Bridges Trench, and we've positively dated a 14th century building.
Will you show me your house?
I will do. We're now going into the backyard. See those stones there? We've been assuming that that's the wall of the back wall of the house, but it seems that it's actually a post pad. So you've had great big posts coming up either side of the entrance.
I love these flagstones.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they're generally positioned in the centre of the house. So this is where you would have performed your essential domestic duties, where you would have had your hearth and things like that.
And over here?
Well, you can see the end of the flagstones, and this is where we would have had a timber wall coming up here.
This is the back wall.
That's the back wall.
Yeah.
And on this side of it, you've still got that revetment wall acting as a boundary or an endpoint to your property.
These foundations were once part of a 30-foot wooden longhouse, which would have been covered with a thatched roof. It wasn't the last house to be built or lived in Ulnaby, because in both Matt and Rackshaw's trenches, we've found evidence of people living here right up to the 17th century. And what's more, Rackshaw's discovered not one, but 2 houses.
The wall seems to be sitting on top of this yellow clay layer.
Down in the corner there?
Yeah, it's actually running underneath this wall. Now, anything on the other side of that wall should be the exterior,
Right.
but it all seems to be the same layer. It looks like a floor surface. Now, we might have a possibility of a post hole in the corner.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
So, was there an earlier timber phase here, and then somebody knocked that down and then built the stone building?
Well, that's very interesting, because the earthwork plan suggests that there's been bigger plots subdivided later on here, and it looks as if you've got the archaeological evidence for that.
So we've got 2 building phases in Rackshaw's Trench, a timber structure, very much like the house in Bridges Trench, then a later 14th century stone longhouse built on top of it. We know from the pottery that it was occupied for the next 300 years, but was that the end of Ulnaby village?
The last time I can pick up any real evidence for a village being here is in the early 17th century, because in 1629, Ulnaby was passed to Francis and Stephen Thompson, gentlemen. We don't know much about them, but this document does tell us about their estate, and Ulnaby consisted of 5 messuages.
That's farmsteads, isn't it?
Farmsteads, yeah. 3 cottages, 5 barns, 3 gardens, with 100 acres of arable, 100 acres of meadow, and 200 acres of pasture. So it's still a
there.
sizable community.
You know, if you've got 100 acres of arable, you've got to have a labour force to work it. It sounds like one of these gradual, slow winds down as people clear off, the older people die off, and eventually it just dies on its feet.
So after 3 challenging days, I think we've finally cracked the story of medieval Ulnaby and its villagers. While we haven't tied down a date for its origins, we've discovered the village was well established by the 14th century. It then flourished. This is Wicken in Northamptonshire, which may look to you or me like a typical English village. Over here you've got the posh manor house, you've got the church next to it. But 800 years ago, there were 2 churches and 2 manor houses, in fact 2 villages, separated by this little stream. Right here where we are now was Wick Deeve, and over here to the south was Wick Hammon. Naturally, the current residents of Wicken are keen to find out why there were 2 villages here in the Middle Ages, and they also want to know what happened to the church and the other bits and pieces of Wick Hammon that have long since gone. They also want to know which was here first. But understandably, they're very keen to establish who's got the oldest bit of the village in their back garden. Time Team have been invited here to investigate the origins of 2 English villages, and as usual, we've got just 3 days to dig up the answers. Oozing with history, the village of Wicken is situated about 5 miles away from the very modern town of Milton Keynes. But we're not the only ones invited to investigate the two medieval villages that once existed here. There's already a research dig going on, run by Cardiff and Leicester universities. Richard, you've already got a university dig here. Why are we here?
There's just so much archaeology in this village. We're looking at one particular area. We've put little test pits in other parts of the village, and everywhere we go, there's archaeology in the ground. And so I'm really pleased that the villagers called you in.
So
we need your help.
Where are you looking first of all?
We're concentrating at the moment on a manor house site in Wicken.
And what are we going to do?
Well, there's the church in this area here. We know roughly where it is. The farmer's got lots of boulders and stuff in the field, but we don't precisely know where it is. Then in Wick over here, we've got the church and the manor house and an area of earthworks here that need looking at in Warren Field. It's full of earthworks, look. And you've got a certain amount of information for this, but we need to do an area excavation to understand what that is.
So the hunt's on to see which village has the earliest origins. And our target area here in Wick is potentially really exciting. Test pits dug in this field have turned up Saxon pottery dating way back to the 9th century. Meanwhile, our second site in Wick couldn't be more different. Here we're searching for a medieval church, thought to be in this field somewhere, but we're hoping to find out if the church was built on an earlier religious site. We're digging two villages, and in order not to confuse you or ourselves, we had this great idea, which was that we would put all the people who were working in one village in one coloured T-shirt and all the people who were working in the other one in another coloured T-shirt. But that plan collapsed on us when the two team leaders adamantly refused, in a fit of fashion paranoia, not to wear the T-shirts.
Yellow's not my colour, I'm afraid.
All right, Queenie, which village are you digging?
I'm doing Wick.
And Wick means?
Well, it's the name of the people who lived here. William de Dive came to hold the manor of 1242, and that's what gave the village its name.
And what do you hope to find in Wick?
Well, I think we're going to find the earlier origins. I mean, that's the medieval period, but I think we could go back much earlier and maybe find a planned settlement of the 9th century. That's what I'm hoping.
And Giorgio Armani, your village is?
Wick, as Bridget's got so gloriously here.
What does Hammond mean?
It's the name of the whole of the estate, in this case the 12th century. But it must go back earlier. And what I want Bridget you to find me is some nice Anglo-Saxon evidence for the earlier settlement here.
Why Sam should think that he has any right to fashion paranoia? He's hiding this hat.
Any hat is better than no hat in this weather.
I don't know if you noticed there, but they started talking more about the Saxon origins of the village, because originally, before they split into two, the theory is that there was only one village called Wick, but hopefully Mick will be able to explain more about that to me later on. So Helen's team are going to be working in Wick, where Stuart has been mapping the lumps and bumps. He reckons most of the bigger earthworks are likely to be 15th century and to do with the manor house. But can he see any trace of anything that could be earlier?
What is interesting about the earthworks, if you filter off all the obvious stuff, there is kind of a background noise of subtle earthworks.
Show me a subtle earthwork.
Right. Mission impossible, that, isn't it?
This is a game I've played with Stuart before.
The ground rises up very slightly.
Is it just here?
That's it, yeah, it's just right.
Slight earthworks are very difficult to see, but as usual, he's got ideas on where we should dig.
My feeling is, if we're looking for background noise that's pre-manor, then we ought to be looking in this corner.
But this is the same area that you've got the early pottery down in this corner, isn't it?
It does seem that all the evidence is coming together and
pointing I reckon we want an area down in that corner, don't we?
So our first trench in search of the origins of Wick is going in over one of Stuart's subtle earthworks, and in an area that's also turned up Saxon pottery. Over at Wick Sam wants to get on with finding the village's missing church, a building that was pulled down in the 17th century. Stuart, who's much in demand this morning, has found an old map he thinks will help.
1717 it's dated. There's the villagers there, and you can see there's a little parcel in there, which is quite difficult to read at that scale. But if you blow it up, look what it says, the old churchyard, which I think might be a bit of a clue.
Yeah, might be, yeah.
And it also shows a building just there, which I'm confident is that barn behind us.
Oh yes, that looks appropriate.
So this map doesn't show the church at all, but it does give us the area of the churchyard, which is actually over there under where that crop is.
So it's in here somewhere, but where exactly? John's talking to the farmer, who reckons he can narrow down the search.
This is a very light field, particularly this end of the field.
Yeah.
But there's a patch, you can see a ridge just across here where the crop is tall, a little bit higher. And when we work the field, there is masses of stone there. Big stone like that.
OK, well, I'll arrange for the machine to come in and we'll take as smaller area as possible.
Yes, that's accepted. That's what we've agreed.
So the business of clearing the crop gets underway in Wicken. Basically, all we need to do is flatten the wheat so that Geophys can get in to do their survey. And given we're only clearing a relatively small area, we shouldn't have to wait long to get their first results. Over at Wicken, we're opening up a second trench and turning up a lot of 13th century pottery.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly there were people living here in medieval times.
What you got?
I think that looks a bit
Oh,
better.
yeah, that's the stuff.
There's some big old pieces.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Where's this coming from?
Pottersbury, just up the road. It's called Pottersbury because it was full of potters. There's been, in the medieval times, there's been about 20 kilns excavated there, and it's only a little village, but it's stuffed full of pottery kilns.
Back at Wicken, Geophys are ready to reveal the first ever picture of this village's long-lost church.
I mean, it's not a clear footprint of a church.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, there's definitely a building here.
And it looks to me as if there's lots of rubble over there.
Yes.
I mean, do you think you can find the division between the nave and the chancel?
Yeah.
Hang on, that's which bit's what?
The chancel's the eastern bit with the altar in.
Yeah.
And then there's usually an arch, and then there's a bigger bit, the nave for the congregation.
Yeah.
But since churches tend to alter around that chancel arch, it's a good place to try and locate.
Well, that's where we want to go.
Well, it looks to me as if you might have the sort of chancel coming out here and the rest of it back there. So, yeah, if you can drop us on that.
The earliest documentary reference for this church is in 1218, but we've no clue to when it was actually built. Hopefully this trench will tell us that, and most importantly, if it was built on the site of an earlier Saxon church. A church was an essential part of any medieval or Saxon manor. Richard, if I was a lord of the manor here in the Middle Ages, how would I have gone about getting a church built? Would I have to ask anybody?
You just ask permission from the bishop just to get, you know, a permission to actually have a place of worship. But then after that, you can do what you like.
And how would I have gone about getting a design together?
Depends how much money you've got. If you've got lots of money, you can get the best masons in the country. They could build you a church, no matter what size it is, to the latest styles. If you're just using a local chap, then he would just use the local design of church, and that could be quite conservative in design.
In Wicken, the church and manor house still exist today, although both were completely rebuilt in the 17th century. What we're looking for in Warren Field is evidence of where the earliest villagers lived. And Phil's keeping his eyes peeled for even the smallest bit of evidence.
Oh, Helen.
You've got something? Oh, wow. I can't believe you spotted that.
Oh, that's better. Look at that. Like a little pin, isn't it?
It's absolutely minute, or a lace end. Oh, yes.
Look at that.
Isn't that
Is
beautiful?
that well spotted, Phil?
Done. That's amazing. It is. It's a lace end. You know, like just like that on my shoelace. Yes, but it's going. You can date these.
Are you really an expert on absolute rubbish? I mean, how would you possibly know about dating lace ends? Nobody could know that.
Well, you have to do everything in my line of work.
And there are plenty of other metal finds that have survived surprisingly well.
There's a few nice ones. 17th century royal farthing token, 18th century halfpenny from Ireland, but this one's the best. That is a medieval buckle, probably 13th, 14th century, and look how it shines.
It really does.
It shines, doesn't it?
It shines.
Yeah. And you can see how it's been made on the back. There's the file marks. It's a nice little thing. It's well made.
Mick's keen to widen our search for Saxon material in the village, and he's gone off to see if he can get permission to dig test pits in a few back gardens.
Right, it must be this one.
I better ask the boss.
Go on then.
Can you show us your garden and we can have a look at it?
Thanks.
You know the idea, we just dig a 1 by 1 metre pit to see what sort of pottery and stuff you've got, and you know, that'll tell us a lot about the way the village has developed. I mean, do you mind us disturbing your grass?
We'll be as careful as we can.
That's okay. Anything, anywhere.
Because, I mean, if you take...
This family have already collected a few finds and stored them near the stream that was once the boundary between the two villages.
And the stream's virtually dried up, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, in the winter, that'll actually flow over that pipe for about 6 or 7 inches.
Really?
Yeah.
So this is our stream, isn't it, Mick?
Yeah, but you can't believe it. It's all dried up right the way through, you know.
Yeah. These are the stones.
Oh, yes,
and that.
right.
The pottery is on, unfortunately over small bits.
But, I mean, that looks like building stone.
Yeah. It's good.
So that, yeah, so that's very good news. That suggests you might have had a building or a house on the site originally.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that was under. There used to be a garage there, and
Yeah.
that was under the base. My
Yeah.
wife dug all that out by hand.
Meanwhile, over here in Wickhammon, I'm trying to get permission for more test pits, and the garden of this house seems to be perfect. Oh, nice house.
What a beautiful pool, Tony.
Oh.
Look at that. You're lucky in this weather.
Wow. It goes on for miles.
It just keeps on going, even in that direction.
On and on and on. Well, I think we're going to need to consult about where best to put it. But you wouldn't mind, provided we don't do it over there, that we put something in. It would only be little.
Yeah, that's fine. Anywhere.
This garden is especially interesting because it's got a curved boundary round it, and it's just next to our church site in Wickhammon. We're approaching the end of the day now, but I'm keen to see how we're getting on unearthing a church that was last seen way back in 1619. Raksha, you've got something.
Yeah, we're starting to see something eventually. We have these rather substantial stones here, and then if you look at these two, they're faced off, so...
So could that be the outside wall of the church?
It'd be part of it, certainly. Not all of it, but part of it.
What do you mean part of it?
It'd be wider than that.
Well, we should find out tomorrow if this is the outer wall, but at least we're getting clear wall edges that even I can see. Whereas over in Wickdeave, the various phases of archaeology are much more difficult to make out. Nearly at the end of day one, we put this trench in because we were looking for evidence of the very first buildings in Wickdeave, but so far we've got lots and lots of pottery finds, but absolutely no structures whatsoever. And the same's true in this trench over here. Lots of rubble, lots of pottery finds, but no structures. Paul, what does the pottery tell us?
Well, we've got a really, really nice sequence of pottery going from before the Norman Conquest through to the medieval period. Most of it is the high medieval, quite big pieces. And then we've got this, fragment of a Nottingham night jug, probably about this big originally, something like that. They're really unusual in this part of the world. Would have had sort of models of knights in armour with shields and what have you attached to it. Very unusual. The interesting thing is, in the background, underneath all this sort of high medieval pottery, we've got a little scatter of lots of small pieces of earlier stuff.
Ah!
Now, a lot of this dates to around about the Norman Conquest, let's say 1050, plus or minus 50. And we got one little bit here. If you squint really hard, you could push that back to about 900.
Definitely 900. This is so frustrating. We've got this Anglo-Saxon pottery which takes us back to something like 150 years before William the Conqueror arrived, but no Saxon structures. Hopefully we'll find them tomorrow. Also tomorrow, virgin territory. We're going to go to a lot of people's back gardens where no one's ever dug before and start putting in holes. I love it when we do that. Beginning of day two here at Wicken in Northamptonshire, where we're looking for the origins of the village. Actually, it's a bit more complicated than that because in the Middle Ages it was split into two villages. You had Wickdeave here where we are now, and then a little stream, and then Wickhammon over here. So far here in Wickdeave we've had some Anglo-Saxon pottery out of that field and some mysterious earthworks, but as yet no structures, so we're going to keep on digging here. But the most exciting part of the day for me is that we're adopting a test pit strategy, which means we're going to dig lots of little holes all over the village, and in order to do that we've recruited an army of volunteers who Mick and Richard are now briefing. We're putting in test pits in both Wickdeave and Wickhammon.
Don't assume, because it doesn't look interesting, that it isn't. You know, if any doubts at all, keep it.
The worry is that they might not recognise Saxon pottery.
It basically looks like dog biscuits, but terribly important, you know.
The test pits will only be 1 metre square, but they'll help to build up a picture of where people were living in medieval and Saxon times. Our test pits are going in on gardens coloured green on this map. But I'm wondering if we really need any more, because all these red dots record test pits already dug by Cardiff University.
But I mean, you always do need more, because the finer the number that you've got, the more you can see the variations in different parts of the village.
This is the area that I found so frustrating last night.
Why did you find that frustrating?
Well, because we've got loads and loads of finds from it and absolutely no Anglo-Saxon structures.
If you'd have stayed around a bit longer and not skived off as you did, you would have actually been aware that we actually found post holes last night.
Really?
In that trench, there are post holes.
And is there any way of dating those?
Not at the moment. But the potential in that trench is enormous.
So are we going to put test pits in this field as well?
No, we've got enough test pits in the field up to tell us what there is there.
Oh, you can't have too many test pits.
No, you can't, that's true.
The plan for Warren Field is to open 2 more trenches to give us a bigger window on the areas where the test pits turned up Saxon pottery. The theory is that this area may have been the early centre of Wick, and I'm hoping Phil's post holes belong to a Saxon building, but we'll have to wait for him to dig them to find out. A mere 400 metres away, we're also digging the site of a medieval church in what was once the village of Wickhammon. Churches are often built on older religious sites, and I'm hoping that we might discover that Wickhammon has some early Saxon history as well. Taking a look from the helicopter, Stuart can see dark lines showing up very clearly in the wheat field.
There is a crop mark of an enclosure coming out from that hedge line.
Oh, yes, I see.
Going out,
yeah.
And then it turns an angle. Now, that's quite interesting. You see it now quite clearly, can't
across
you?
there, and then, is that the churchyard?
I think that's the extent of the churchyard, yeah.
Stuart's hoping to piece together the layout of both medieval villages over the next few days. While down on the ground at the church site, there's a puzzle of medieval walls to make sense of. This morning, Raksha's discovered that the outer wall of the building isn't here, as we thought yesterday, but where she's digging now.
Now we've got this great big whopping wall running through here.
The footings were often fossilised in a church. Even if the church was demolished and rebuilt, you'd often reuse the same footings. It just makes sense. So if we can bottom out the footings, maybe we'll find phasing there.
One of Raksha's main jobs now will be to dig down alongside the outer wall to see if it's been built on the foundations of an earlier church. Meanwhile, over at Wick, Matt's got some good news about one of our new trenches.
We've got a ditch. You can see the edge of it coming along here. We've just got to the bottom of it here. It's about 20 centimetres deep. So we've got one side there. Unfortunately, the other side is just beyond the section here, so I think I'll have to extend it a little bit just to get the full width of it.
Even better, we've got some pottery to date it.
Isn't that fantastic?
It's 10th century. It's exactly what we're looking for. It's near to where it's the classic late Saxon pottery in this part of the world.
But it's early days yet. We don't know if it is a ditch until we extend the trench to find the other edge of it. But we do have our first really good evidence of people living around here in Saxon times. Which way around does this go?
The rim's in turn, so it's kind of like that.
And how deep is it?
Oh, maybe 3 inches at the most.
Oh, quite small.
Yeah.
And how wide?
In a bit. Yeah, about that probably.
So sort of shepherd's pie size?
Oh yeah, they're quite small. You do sometimes get them with sockets in the side that you could put wooden handles in and use them as frying pans.
At Wickhammon, the diggers are relishing this rare opportunity to uncover the history of a church. And happily, there's no shortage of finds.
I had to get you over here because I'm quite excited by these little finds that are coming up. Look, there's glass here coming up, typical medieval glass. The way it's corroded, it looks like, well, I would consider window glass. But more excitingly, next to it, I found this really intriguing object. And the only thing I've ever seen like it is medieval spectacle rims. But bring me down to earth if I'm going too far.
I've never seen anything like it except a pair of glasses, and in fact, it's even got that the indent on the inside to hold the lens.
Absolutely. Well, there's an insert there for something to fit in. There's a decoration on the side there, which either has an attachment or it could be a hinge. But I mean, that's fine workmanship.
Wow, I don't know. Found next to that bit of glass. Could someone drop the spectacles?
With help from graphics, we can show what these bone spectacles may have looked like. They're a rare find and likely to date to the 15th or early 16th century.
Helen? What are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be over at Wicken.
But it's Raksha's end of the trench that's got everybody excited.
Why, what we got, Raksha?
Well, I decided to extend the trench because we wanted to see whether we could find any earlier phases of the wall. And as we were going down, we seemed to have found a burial.
A burial?
Yeah, you can see this soft material here, which is the fill of the grave, and this is quite hard, and you can see the cut just going all the way around. We found some ribs popping up here. There's a bit of a clavicle, which is this bone just here. But the really interesting thing about it is that it's north-south aligned.
And it's underneath that wall there?
Yeah, it's underneath the wall.
So it's earlier than the wall. When do we think the wall is?
Well, we think that this church complex is about 13th century.
So what's the big deal about it being north-south?
Well, most medieval burials are supposed to be west-east. You have your head to the west and your body to the east. And that's true for the vast majority of the medieval period. But the further you go back into the Anglo-Saxon period, life is not so simple. They haven't quite made a decision about exactly how they should be burying each other. And sometimes you do get these anomalous, weird burials. And I think this might be one of them.
So this could be really early?
I think it could be really early, yes.
Mid-Saxon or whatever?
These 3 bits of 12th century pottery came from on top of the burial, but what we need now is to find some in the grave to date it.
So is that what you're going to do now?
Well, we first have to clean the wall, get rid of the wall, because we're obviously digging stratigraphically like a good archaeologist would, and then we'll have to deal with the burial.
Well, I know you're not allowed to hurry, but can you do the thing that archaeologists do that's like hurrying?
OK.
The discovery of a burial actually under a wall is more than we could have hoped for. It should help to date the construction of the wall, and better still, it could be proof that we found evidence of a Saxon settlement here in Wickhammon as well. But typically, just as I start to get excited, I'm given the bad news from Wickdeave.
What we thought was a ditch actually looks more like a pit now.
Not only has our ditch turned out to be a pit, but Matt's discovered medieval pottery in it, suggesting it was dug in the 12th century rather than in Saxon times.
Where's these post holes you were so pleased with then?
Phil's got news too. He's finished digging his post holes, and they too are part of the medieval history of Wickdeave.
One there and one there. And they're actually quite interesting for showing just how difficult it is to perhaps pick up these post holes. You see, this one is pretty obvious because you've got this very dark fill contrasting with this white material.
Sure.
And then this one, well, it's absolutely massive. Look, if I pop my hand down in there, look, it's as deep as that. And we've got a nice piece of 13th century pottery. So I think there's a good chance that we're definitely back into the 13th century.
These post holes clearly held big, substantial timbers. But it's hard to make sense of them without extending the trench. It's all complicated soil stains and post holes, apart from one feature that even I can see.
And this is actually a wall. Now, if you follow up through here, you can project it right the way through here. And when you get to here, it forms a right angle with these big earthworks of the manorial complex.
These are walls likely to have been put in by the manor and connected with the later use of this field. If there's any evidence surviving of earlier occupation, it'll be buried deeper down. But I'm beginning to wonder if there is a Saxon settlement here. To me, the best evidence of Saxon activity is down at the church site, where we've got our burial. But the archaeologists aren't giving up in Warren Field, and they, of course, are pleased to be adding to the medieval story of Wickdeave. All the evidence suggests that in the 13th century, this field contained numerous wooden houses fronting onto the road, close to the manor house and church. Then it appears these houses were all cleared away when the Lord of Wickdeave extended the grounds around the manor sometime in the 15th century. As well as adding to the picture of medieval Wickdeave, we also want to work out the layout of medieval Wickhammon. We've already managed to locate the exact position of the church, and we're learning all sorts of details about what it looked like.
Oh, wow.
Look at that. Isn't that an amazing decoration?
That is fabulous.
You can imagine there must have been 4 of them there, curving around in a circle. It's quite fancy, no matter where it is, isn't it? I mean, we haven't found anything else like that in the trench.
No, we haven't. That's amazing.
Stuart now wants to find the missing manor house of Wick Hammon, and he's interested to see the relationship between the church and the medieval buildings discovered here in the 4-week dig being carried out by Cardiff and Leicester universities.
Oh, Richard, this is impressive.
It is impressive, but also complicated and much easier to appreciate by looking at Victor's drawing. Essentially, what they've discovered are 2 medieval buildings dating to 1250 AD. The first is a combined bakehouse and brewhouse, while the second structure is a beautifully built dovecot. This is spectacular.
We're looking now down into a rather fine dovecot.
Wow. So you've actually got some pigeonholes on the left-hand side there.
We've got the remnants of 2 rows of pigeonholes with the little ledges where the birds could land.
Yeah.
Mick, that's really substantial,
It is fantastic, isn't
So
it?
what does that tell us?
Well, presumably we're near a manorial complex or something like that.
I think we're in the manorial farm.
Right.
Lords have a monopoly on the keeping of doves and the brewing of ale. So we're very much close to the Lord here, I think.
But do you think this is the manorial complex itself? Because I mean, I've been looking at the layout of the village and the boundaries around it. The dovecot is over here and the church is over here. They seem quite a long way apart for this to be within the manorial enclosure.
After analysing all the maps, Stuart reckons this curving boundary is a clue that the manor house was situated here. This would make sense, as it would put the manor house and the church close together as they are in Wick Deeve. It's possible that the dovecot and the brewhouse were kept separate as a kind of little industrial unit. This is the first time anyone's ever been able to picture the 2 manors of Wick Hammon and Wick Deeve together. And thanks to the detail coming from the trenches, we're getting a real insight into the lifestyle of the lord of the manor.
I mean, it's obvious that the oven is capable of baking, I don't know, 50 or 100 loaves of bread at once.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're capable of probably brewing 50 gallons of ale at a time. And
So it's not a one-family job.
Well, it's for a household.
What about the doves?
Well, the doves are a high-status food. The great legend is that they kept doves in order to eat them in the winter when you could only got salt meat. It's a source of fresh meat in the winter. Nonsense. All the household accounts we have show them eating doves between May and October. It's a summer food because what they eat are the young squabs.
Squabs.
They they climb up ladders inside the dovecot and they take the young before they've flown.
With the day almost over, there's just time to water the trenches and the archaeologists, while Mick and I check the progress in our test pits. How you getting on with the test pits, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. I've been round them all now, and most of them are producing medieval pottery.
It's all pretty much Pottersbury ware, sort of 1250, 1300 onwards. There's a few bits of earlier stuff, maybe 12th century, but nothing before that. They're all ongoing. I mean, you know, some are deeper than others. Some are only about 20 centimetres deep, some are about 40 centimetres deep.
I think you should knock off now. It's late, it's hot. We'll do the rest tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow, as they go deeper, they'll turn up some Saxon evidence.
A lot of us are, you see, aren't we?
End of day 2, and it's been a great day, particularly given how hard it's been to dig in this heat. We still haven't found any Anglo-Saxon structures, but Phil's got an idea for one more trench at Wick Deeve, so fingers crossed. The big news today, though, has been the church just over the road and this mysterious burial underneath it. We're having to dig very slowly and very carefully because it's very fragile and possibly very important archaeology, and hopefully tomorrow we'll find out exactly what it is. Cheers. Beginning of day 3 here at Wicken in Northamptonshire, where we're looking for the origins of 2 villages, Wick Deeve up here where we are and Wick Hammon down here. All these red dots are test pits that were put in before we arrived. Yesterday, these yellow squares are test pits that we put in, lots of geophys, and here was the big triumph. We found the foundations of a church in Wick Hammon with a grave cut underneath, which could be Saxon, so maybe we've got the origins of that village there. But here, this is so frustrating. This is called the Warren Field. We were looking for structures over here, possibly Saxon. We found absolutely nothing. And then this morning, just when we arrived, Ian had started whipping off the topsoil over here with his digger, so presumably there's another trench going in miles from where we've done all the other excavation. Mick?
It's not actually miles from where we've done
Oh, miles, it's a television term, it means yards.
It's here, look. So it's another one round the field.
But Richard, I thought all the finds that we'd had were over here.
We've had a change of strategy. We put in these trenches where I've been finding the early material, but we can't relate that to anything structural. It may be that they're not living there, but throwing material into their backyards. So we're going somewhere which seems clean, that doesn't have evidence.
Let me get this clear. You're putting it in a trench because of the absence of evidence.
Yes. It's crazy, I know.
But, I mean, you don't have rubbish in your house, do you? You go and put it in the bin. You don't live on top of it, so it might just work.
Not in Phil's house.
What do you know about my home?
It's covered in flint flakes.
Yeah, but that's important, though, isn't it?
So what else are we going to do today?
Then at the church site, we're going to put a couple of sections in.
While Mick's excited about digging up the medieval church in Wickhammon, I can't wait to find out more about the burial we've discovered, situated here, actually under the wall of the church. Yesterday you were getting really excited. You said you thought there was the possibility that they could be as early as 7th century, something like that. Is there still that possibility?
Well, it was always a bit of a long shot. They're very unusual burials, but I think looking at it more, possibly the likelihood is less because we've got more than one individual, disarticulated, nothing in situ, and I'm even beginning to wonder about the grave cut.
Oh, why do archaeologists always do this? You get really excited about something, then you back away from it, step by step.
I'm a bit more depressed this morning than I was last night.
Oh, pull yourself together. Helen's worry is that we might not have discovered an in situ burial under the wall of the church. So far, we found no trace of a skull, and they could just be random bones. Digging graves is a slow process, but with less than a day to go, hopefully we'll get an answer soon. But there's a lot more to this trench than just old bones. We're discovering all sorts of details about the history of this church.
Wow, look at that. Beautiful, isn't it? I mean, these tiles are really small, and they're actually smaller than some of those decorated tiles that we've had, which suggests an earlier phase of flora. They are very small. I've seen them small in a sort of church environment. They're tiny.
But it's not just in the trenches that we're uncovering the forgotten history of Wicken. Stuart's been making some important discoveries of his own about the village green and the large garden belonging to the rectory.
I sometimes get the feeling at the beginning of day 3 that we've been summoned by Stuart.
To be told what's going on.
Stuart spotted on an old map that these two areas were both covered in houses that have been cleared away since the map was drawn in 1717.
And what they've done is just cleared all those properties away to create a large garden, and they're diverting the stream to put ponds in there. It's a piece of ornamental landscaping. It's their garden.
It's just like when they used to build the stately homes.
That's right. Get rid of the peasants.
Well, it's a mini one, isn't it? It's a mini park, really.
That's right.
Is what they're doing, yeah.
Well, the
biggest surprise, though, is that Stuart reckons this stream wasn't the boundary between the two villages in medieval times.
I can't see any evidence on this map at all of a stream going through here. You can see it over here. You know, it's shown really quite clearly, and a curvy boundary here which might reflect it. But there's nothing in here which shows that the stream came through this part of the village. In fact, the layout of the village is actually quite regular over here, and I think the road is more likely to be part of the structure and division between the two villages.
So, in earlier times, this road continued like this and was probably the boundary between the two villages. Geophys have already surveyed the rectory gardens, so with permission from the owner, we're opening up a test pit here.
This road continued in the past on through your garden, and it's got properties coming off it, coming down the hill here, and we've no idea what date they are at all. So what we're doing here is we're putting in a little tiny test pit, and we'll sieve it to get any pottery out, and hopefully that will tell us what date the properties that have been here actually are.
Sadly, our last trench in Wickdeave has failed to find any Saxon evidence, or indeed anything. We're going to close down our trenches here, and Phil will go over to the church dig at Wickhammon, where we've got some breaking news.
You've caught us at the most exciting moment. We think we found at least part of a skull in the grave cut.
And the other thing that's really exciting is we've just extended the trench. Out of the machining came a piece of pottery.
Paul has dated that to Maxi ware, 650 to 750.
Oh, That's fantastic. That's the early stuff we've got then.
I know it is beginning to raise the possibility that there is activity, including burials, on this site, right from the Middle Saxon period.
Point of clarification, are you the same archaeologist who was so miserable round the bonnet of the van earlier on?
Yeah, I'm the one who's jumping up and down with delight.
Fantastic. We have got an in-situ burial, and it could be 1,300 years old, although it has been disturbed by later building on this site.
We've got this grave cut here. The skull would have been just under the wall here, but as you can see, because they were building the wall, they've messed around with it, and the skull has actually travelled down to here. None of the bones are articulated. They're just a jumbled mess. And here we have some of the teeth.
That's hardly worn at all. That's
No.
like a juvenile or a young adult,
Yeah.
isn't it?
The piece of maxi ware, this lovely little chunk, that actually came out of the machining from just a little bit further away from here. So it's a couple of metres from the burial. Shows activity happening in the same area, but doesn't actually date it, can't really be related to it. Sorry if I got your hopes up earlier.
Ideally, what we need is to find more pottery in the grave to precisely date the burial. This bit comes from a pot that would have looked something like this, and surely it's an encouraging sign that there was something going on here in Saxon times. We've only got a few hours left to find out, so it's just as well that we're starting to make sense of the medieval church. We wanted to find the junction between the nave, where the congregation stood, and the chancel, where the altar was, and it looks like we've found it. The basic plan, as we understand it, looks like this. We've got a church that was enlarged at various times and orientated east-west as normal. However, rather than having burials parallel with the building, we've discovered a grave orientated north-south and under the wall of the medieval building. The betting is that it's a Saxon burial, but can we prove it? I'm hoping we've at last found the oldest bit of this village, the original Saxon settlement that would have been called Wick. This is an Old English word, but I'm not sure exactly what it means.
It's a word borrowed from the Latin vicus, so it becomes wick in Old English, and it must mean adjacency to some kind of Roman site.
It's like vicus, isn't it?
Exactly, it is the anglicisation of vicus.
Oh, we've dug a few of those. They're like kind of little satellite settlements next to a fortress.
But I think it's that next to that's the critical bit, subsidiary to, isn't it? And we've got that in Wicken.
In which sense?
Well, there is a scatter of Roman pottery to the south of the current village that is the Roman settlement that presumably the Wick was next to.
So this area might have been the original Wick settlement that later became Wickhammon. There could even have been a Saxon church here, because we've now discovered another burial close to the one Raksha's digging, and once again it seems to be underneath the walls of the medieval church. This is turning out to be a spectacular trench. The medieval finds alone are enough to impress the farmer who normally works this field.
And lots of lovely small metal finds.
Quite incredible that you can find these.
Well, these were with the help of the metal detectorists, and we've got some rather wonderful things. I mean, this is just a pin, but when you're in a churchyard, it's almost certainly a shroud pin. And then we've got a coin. This is a halfpenny of one of the Henrys from the London Mint, probably Henry VI, sometime in the 15th century. But this is the most interesting.
It's like a hinge.
It is like a hinge, yes. When you turn it over, you can see it's got a little hole in the bottom. Now, that would have fitted on a strap on the cover of a book, and this would have fitted over a peg on the other cover. And through the hinge, you'd have put a cord, so you could have pulled it off to open your book. And this dome stops the leather cover from rubbing on the wood of the shelf or the lectern.
And in its heyday, this church would have been well attended and a very important meeting point for the area.
For the whole village, yes. Yes, it would have been absolutely the heart of the village.
Oh, absolutely.
Mick wants to work out what the interior of the medieval church looked like. He reckons he's standing here, just in front of the altar.
You can see you've got this little wall here that then turns and goes along there.
Yes.
And you've got the same sort of what stone there, that one along there.
A mirror image of it?
Yeah. And I wonder if this, in fact, is not the chancel arch with the screen in it.
Yes, yes.
And as you step into the chancel here with the floor, you've got perhaps wooden floors on there with seats on.
Yes,
You know,
because the stones are foundations for horizontal timbers,
Yeah.
which will have carved timbers on them.
And then in the middle, you've got this paving. I mean, it's very rough.
Well, it could be a tomb, couldn't it? It could be a tomb in the centre of
I mean, this
the
is where the most
chancel.
important person would be
That's
buried,
right.
isn't
Yes,
it?
I mean here a Hammond would be buried.
Ah, right.
You know, one of
Founder of the church,
the
I
lord of the manor
Yeah,
and the founder of the church. It'd be just the right place for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on a small scale, isn't it? But it's very elaborate and complicated. I mean, they put a lot of work and effort and expense into this building.
It's not often we've got two professors on hand to decipher such complicated archaeology.
And then there's going to be a door probably on that wall coming into that, isn't it?
Because if we imagine this to be the 13th century, there actually wouldn't be much seating in there.
No, they'd be standing up, wouldn't they?
That's right.
Yeah.
This is Mick's attempt to show the view from the altar, and this is Victor's version. Although a lot more digging would be needed to get the full story, Mick reckons we know enough to picture the church when it was first built in the 12th century.
Usually the tower's added later in the sequence, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So by the time we put the tower on, I think that would have side aisles.
And this is how we think it looked before it was pulled down in the 17th century. Although the focus is now very much on the church here in Wickhammon, there's still the job of sorting out all the information gleaned from our various test pits. Essentially, what we've been doing is adding lots of new information to the archaeological map, such as the lost road and buildings discovered here in the rectory gardens.
Well, nearly everything from this test pit's medieval. It's the Pottersbury again, mid-13th to 14th.
We didn't find any trace of Saxon history in these back gardens, but the medieval pottery finds add to the picture of how the village of Wickdeave expanded around 1200 AD.
Yeah, I mean, it all seems to be from the pottery the same date along this entire block. I mean, I can't imagine that these things just sprung up simultaneously by accident, certainly.
No.
So.
Strikes me that we might have a bit of village planning going on here in Wickdeave.
It was always a tall order to find the origins of 2 villages in 3 days, but with time running out now, I'm desperate to know if we have found the earliest focus for settlement here at the church site in Wickhammon. For the last day and a half, we've been getting really excited about this burial here up against this wall. But it now seems that there's another burial on the other side of the wall. And Helen, on the roller coaster of emotion she's been on for the last 2.5 days, is now as excited about this as she was about that earlier. Why?
This is a fantastic thing because it's stratigraphically in much the same position as that. It's earlier than this wall and it's in fantastically good nick.
So what can you tell from it, Jackie?
We've got parts of 3 individuals in here. The bone that you can see that's articulated here, you can see the leg bones coming down and the toe bones down here. That's a neonate, a newborn baby, and that was the in situ. But we've also got redeposited bone next to it of probably an infant of about 4 years old. And then over here, if I just bring this across, that's redeposited bone of a juvenile of about 7 or 8 years old. So we've got some in situ bone, but we've also got redeposited bone that was probably disturbed and redeposited here during the insertion of these 2 walls. So we know that they're earlier than the walls.
I don't want to fling us all into a panic, but are these burials north, south or east, west?
All the great things are the right way round. It's east-west, head at the west and legs at the east.
Which still leaves this one over here out on its own.
Yeah, but then you see, if they do date to this very early period of the Middle Saxon period, then you can have a huge variety of burial practice. They don't all have to be north-south or all west-east. They can be, well, anything they like almost.
So what can we tell the villagers at the end of our 3-day dig? Thanks ever so much for inviting us in. It's been an extraordinarily good dig. Essentially, they wanted to know what is the oldest part of their village and which came first, Wickdeave or Wickhammon. Well, the answer, purely in terms of our finds, must be Wickhammon. We found Saxon pottery there dating to around 650 AD. Not only that, but we discovered burials under the walls of the medieval church that could be Saxon. These now need to be radiocarbon dated, but if they are Saxon, it suggests 2 possibilities. One, that there was originally a Saxon church on this site with burial plots around it, with a medieval church built on top. It would be hard for us to detect. Or it could be that there was a dispersed Saxon settlement around here, typically a few wooden houses, people living around the ruins of a Roman settlement. It seems likely then to me that this area around the church was the original Wick settlement that later became Wickhammon, while the earliest pottery finds in Wickdeave suggests it got going later in the 9th century. Of course, the archaeologists will tell you the story of these two villages is much more complicated. But undeniably, Wickdeave and Wickhammon happily coexisted in medieval times before they were merged together in 1587 to become the village we know today as Wicken. This is the village of Nether Poppleton, just outside York. As you can see, most of the houses are modern, some are Victorian, a few are 18th or at a push 17th century. But from up here, it looks very different. Even I can recognise a traditional medieval village layout, with the main street running up to the church and lots of little plots running off it. And those earthworks to the side of the church are an officially registered medieval site. But the locals think it's older. They think they can trace the roots of their village back to the Normans or even the Saxons. Are they right? We've got just 3 days to find out.
Good morning, everybody. It's really good of you to take part in this. I hope you're going to enjoy it. And I thought I just ought to say a little bit to you about what we're going to do, because it's not really a respectable research strategy to bulldoze your village from end to end, flatten it all out, and then look underneath it. We have to adopt a different strategy.
It's 9 o'clock day one, and the people of Poppleton have assembled to find out how they can help us pin down the true age of their village. They're going to do the work today by digging test pits in their own gardens, with some help from us. So what are we after?
We're after the origins of the village. Does it start as a Saxon village? Is it laid out in the Norman period? Does it come into existence in the Middle Ages?
How do we get that?
Dig lots and lots of pits all over the village, 1 metre test pits, and just get what the finds are from that to indicate what activity there's been on that site.
Hang on, you're persuading these people just to look for finds?
Yeah.
Isn't that the exact opposite of everything that you've told me that archaeology is? Archaeology is about features, archaeology is about stratigraphy, it's about knowledge, not about ripping finds out of the ground.
No, you're absolutely right. You obviously have learned something in the last 12 years.
Well, you haven't.
No, but it's the same idea. It's looking for broken bits of pot that are indications of activity where people have lived and broken stuff in that particular area. So if we start to get 12th century pottery or Saxon pottery or medieval pottery, it'll tell us as activity to that date. If we plot it all across the village, then we'll start to see the concentrations, and those will be the areas we need to dig in to get the structures.
Should we get them started?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you know what you're supposed to do next? About a third of them. Well done, Vic. We want you all to get back to your homes with your pet archaeologist in your hand and start digging, all right? Off you go! As they all set off, there's a great sense of community spirit about. Many people are digging in their own gardens, or they'll help out their less able neighbours. They'll bring all their finds to the incident room. We'll analyse and date them, and when we've identified the oldest, we'll decide where to put trenches in tomorrow. So it looks like there's going to be competition among the locals. Where will the oldest part of the village be? We've divided the village into 5 sections, each one with its own archaeologist, to make sure that things are done properly.
I think you'll be surprised what you find in just the soil of a garden. I live in a 1960s bungalow, so you'd think there'd be absolutely nothing at all in it. And I've got one piece of Roman pottery, about 12 pieces of 12th century pottery, and then everything from 12th century to modern. And that's in a 1960s bungalow garden.
Across the village, test pits are opening all over the place, and everyone's doing their part. We do our best to help out.
Even with that, what you want to do is try and keep things level. So go along like that, rather than digging down. You know, you want to know which finds came from the top of your test pit and which at the bottom.
When you dig a trench, if it's a metre at the top, it must be a metre at the bottom. In other words, the sides of the trench must always be absolutely vertical. This means that the layer that you've got exposed actually on the bottom of the trench, you can actually see it in section. So don't just dig in the middle of the hole, dig right up to the edges, keep them straight. There's Phil's gospel lesson for the day.
By mid-morning, we're well on our way to exploring this side of the village where the main street and houses are. But over here to the east lies the church. It was built in Norman times, so it's possible there was something else there at that time. Geophysics are having an early look around it. And Stuart's already out and about, doing a full landscape survey of the whole area.
The church is usually a central feature of the community, so if we're going to understand how people have lived here, we need to look at the church.
Is that one Norman?
I think Norman in its present form, but there must be earlier and later stuff as well.
Do we know much about the actual history of this site, Sarah?
Well, the church is dedicated to St Everilda, who's a very unusual dedication. There are only 2 churches dedicated to her in Yorkshire. She was a 7th century saint. We think that Bishop Wilfrid, who was Bishop of York, encouraged her to settle in Yorkshire with 2 other nuns in the 670s, and around them a community, it said, of up to 80 nuns soon formed.
So there could actually be a nunnery on this site?
I think so, and the church could be merely one part of a whole series of buildings going off in this direction.
With evidence of them still under the ground
Just
somewhere?
under the surface, yeah.
John, what's the geophys like?
Well, we've had some results back already, and it's looking quite interesting, and points to the possibilities of, you know, other churches being here.
Does that look as building-y to you as it does to me?
It probably is. I mean, that's one of the things that would get us excited about the idea of a line of churches, yeah.
So can we put a trench in there?
Well, we need to do a lot more geophysics first to see a lot more of the area around before we go for that.
So although this church dates from the 11th century, St Everilda lived here 400 years earlier. There may well have been buildings from that time on this site. Could we find a Saxon settlement somewhere around this church? Back in the village, people are beginning to get the hang of things.
Nope, nothing in that one.
And some finds are coming up.
You see a bit of green glaze over there?
Oh,
yeah. It's almost as old as I am.
Another stone unturned.
I think you've got a Roman brick.
You've got a good imagination.
Very vivid, yes. Very vivid.
The early signs, at least in this trench, look good.
That's what I'd call proper medieval. You're like 13th, 14th century. Jug sherds, it's local stuff probably made somewhere around York. These haven't travelled far at all, so, I mean, I think you could well be on top of some medieval archaeology here.
You never believe, would you, that...
No, I'd have never believed this was here at all.
So it's within religious hands.
In the incident room, Carenza and Sarah are having a look at the written history of Poppleton, and there isn't that much to go on.
The Domesday Book, and the Domesday Book tells us quite a bit more. You know, we've got the extract here, and it tells us, in another, that is Nether Poppleton, Odie the deacon had 2.5 caracots taxable. That's 2.5 caracots of land. It's about 300 acres. This land was of St Everilda's, that's the church.
So what date does Poppleton first appear in the written record?
Well, the first reference is in 972, when Oswald, the Archbishop of York, listed a large number of lands in Yorkshire that he said the church had lost during the wars earlier in the century. And among that list, he included just 2 hides, that's about 240 acres, in Poppleton. And that's all the record tells us.
What about the place name itself? That must predate 972.
Well, the place name has Saxon elements in it, Tun meaning a settlement and Popple meaning the pebbly place, so the settlement on the pebbly soil, the settlement on the pebbly, perhaps banks of the river. So it has a Saxon element, and that could indeed be, in one sense, the oldest reference that we have to there being something here.
Phil's now moved up to work on the church, but he isn't where I expected him to be.
Well, this morning we thought we were going to put a trench in here.
Yeah, but the more geophysics we did across this whole area, that corner of the building that looked so definite just disappeared. It just didn't seem as significant.
So there's no building there?
So we decided not to tackle that. It really doesn't look like a building, so we came back over here.
And put one down here. Why is that?
Well, because there is a suggestion that this wall went on this way, and we've got permission to dig 4 square metres, so we thought we'd wrap it round the corner.
Oh, whoa. If you think the wall went that way,
yeah,
why are you digging a trench out there?
We started with those 2 square metres, and then we're going to do the other 2 square metres round this way.
I see you've got a pipe there, Phil. Anything else?
Yeah, you see here, Tony, got a little child burial.
Oh.
Just one of those things, really. I mean, you know it's a burial ground.
What are you going to do with it?
I'm going to give it the due respect it deserves and just leave it alone. Funnily enough, it doesn't actually detract from the objectives of of the trench here.
Which is?
Well, you see, if I get my shovel, see if I slot it in there.
Yeah.
Now, that is the base of the foundations. So the whole church is sitting on big stones like this. The main thing is that there is nothing, no walls coming this way. So in fact, we know that it doesn't look as though there are any aisles or transepts coming this way off of that wall.
Because we thought there might. You see that curve there, Tony?
Yeah.
Looks as if there's an opening in there, and we thought that something might come off here. Well,
so you think it might just be a door?
I think it might be more like a sort of tomb set in the wall or an Easter sepulchre or something. Clearly it's not a structure coming out this way, so this answered that.
So now you've answered that, do you have to continue with this trench, or can you...
No, because we know that it was not wider. What we've now got to prove is whether or not it was longer.
So that's this.
So that's when you wrap it around here?
Wrap it around the corner.
So we'll have this same conversation in a few hours' time.
That little child burial, you know, is typical of what you find all over the place. It's probably an infant, you know, that died at childbirth or something like that, and the parents have just popped it in the churchyard, probably one night, to save, you know, paying the burial fee, but to make sure the child's in consecrated ground.
Across the village, even more test pits are opening up. There are now 32 of them.
3 o'clock day 1, and this whole area is checkered with test pits. There's one down there by that yellow bucket, then 2 gardens along, there's one over there, then another 3 gardens along by that guy in the red hat, there's one, and then way at the end of that same garden by that blue tarpaulin is another one. And what have we found so far? Absolutely nothing.
Strictly speaking, people have found some things, but we're not seeing them in the incident room. They're not getting to us fast enough, so we can't analyse them. Paul and Carenza aren't exactly rushed off their feet, and they're a bit worried.
Carenza, to Ian, Raksha, Matt, Bridget and Kerry, have any of you got any more finds to come in from any test pits? Because we really need it up here as quickly as possible.
I've got some coming in from 15 Hillcrest Avenue.
Anybody else?
Chasing finds by radio isn't working, so when all else fails, there's only one way to get things moving.
Right, how are we doing here? We need to move on with all this. How are you getting on?
About 500 mil down now. We're coming to a close, we think.
Right, OK. Can you get the finds to the incident room as soon as possible? Because we need to get Paul to sort them tonight.
No problem.
Yeah? OK, brilliant, thanks. Right, how are you doing? Are you nearly finished?
Yes.
Can you get those finds down to the incident room now?
Yeah, certainly.
To get them dated tonight.
Right.
OK, brilliant, thanks.
Right.
Well, this worked. Now Paul and Carenza are complaining they've got too much to do.
You could just put them down there somewhere.
It's the end of day one. All the test pits are finally closed. The people who dug them have found loads of stuff. Look, this is just some of the rubbish. But of course, they all want to know what it means. Can we tell them, Mick?
I think so. We're still in the business of analysing the results here and plotting on the map, but we do have late Saxon pottery coming out now.
That's what we were looking for, isn't it?
Yep.
Is this just the only piece of Saxon, Paul, or have you got more?
No, we've got 5 pieces of late Saxon. One's literally, as you were talking, has just appeared.
And how much more have you got to sort through?
I've no idea. There's masses of stuff coming in. They're watching it, sorting it as best they can over here, then getting it through to me, and I'm ploughing through it.
How long is it going to take you?
I don't know.
Well, you know, I'm just acutely aware that we've got a load of people coming in at 9 o'clock.
Sure, but the longer you stand
morning.
there talking, the longer it's going to take.
Yeah, I'm
me.
not having a pop, it's just that there's a lot of people going to come in.
Yeah, well, I realise that. I'm getting through as fast as I can.
Carenza, are we going to be able to tell people where they can put in their trenches tonight?
Well, if we're looking for Saxon, at the moment the concentration seems to be right at the other end of the village in Ian's area, but we've got to go through the finds from all the test pits before we make a decision, because some of the other ones may have equally good concentrations of Saxon material. We can't start until we know that.
So tomorrow, bright and early, loads of people from the village are going to turn up asking what this little lot is all about. Are we going to be able to tell them anything? We'll know tomorrow morning. At 9 a.m, and there's frantic activity in the incident room. Outside, the locals are gathering to find out what we can tell from the test pits yesterday. Inside, we're still trying to work it out. Last night you could have cut the tension in here with a knife. Paul and Carenza and I were getting really frazzled because we wanted to get everything ready for everyone to be able to dig this morning. Well, this one was like Pollyanna. Oh, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. Well, was he right? Have we got everything sorted out?
Yeah, he was, because we got really frazzled and worked really hard at it, and then we've been hard at it this morning, getting all the data presented on a map that looks respectable and that we can show the villagers.
Did you actually find anything that surprised you?
Yeah, we did actually. We've got no Saxon pottery at all from this end of the village, and it's not until we start heading west through the village that we get a few fragments of Saxon pottery, tiny triangle here showing just a few grams of pottery, tiny little amount there, a bit more here as we head west, and then even further west in this completely different bit of the village, what looks like a different history with a lot of Saxon pottery, especially here at number 20. We've got a huge amount of Saxon pottery, suggesting really that there's a focus of Saxon settlement in this area with a lot of activity down here.
All right, that's sorted out the west end, but what about this big bit here?
Well, that's the problem. We haven't really done anything at this end. We've got no handfuls of material, no pottery, nothing to date this end.
We've got Phil's little L-shaped trench around the church, haven't
Didn't
we?
really produce any finds, and yet we would still think that that was where, you know, there was a Saxon church, probably a Saxon monastery. There ought to be something in that area, so we do have to look at that.
What do you think the strategy should be, John?
Well, I think we've got to build on what we did yesterday. Take this test pitting strategy and apply it to this area. We've got to look at around the old stables, the granary, you know, the space at the back of the incident room. Let's get some trenches in there, you know, get some more local people involved in digging those, take it forward.
OK, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming back. I'm going to tell you the results of the test pits yesterday, which you all dug, and thank you ever so much.
Again, today, people from the village have turned up to help. They're all keen to know where the oldest parts of the village might be.
What seems to be the focus of Saxon.
So today, we'll explore that area in more detail. The villagers' job's now done. We do the work from this point on. So the test pit at number 20 is widened to become a full trench. But today we'll concentrate more on the area around the church. It's Norman, but dedicated to a nun who lived in the Saxon period. So we're hopeful of finding Saxon material there.
So up by the church, we open a test pit here. And here. And another here. And John does some more geophysics in and around the church to see if we can find other targets. Mick's getting more and more excited. It's not just Saxon he wants. He thinks that there was a monastery here. That would mean a settlement 400 years earlier than the present church. Could he be right? Mick, you've closed down this trench.
Yeah, well, it's told us all we needed to know, which is that the church doesn't go on further east.
But that means we've still got this 400-year-old gap between the time the nun died here and the time they put up this church in memory of her.
Yes, but I think looking at it as a gap's probably wrong. I mean, we're pretty sure of what would have happened during that period.
Well, what do you think happened?
Well, what tends to happen is when you get somebody who's turned into a saint, you often have a monastic community with it. And that is unlikely to have survived more than a couple of hundred years because the Scandinavians coming through here.
Well, the old Vikings?
Yeah, the Vikings. And they burn everything down, they destroy everything. If there's ever a nunnery here, it just evaporates. The only things you tend to get left is perhaps the church site. If there's enough locals around and they survive and they carry on being Christian, it gets turned into a parish church, or in some cases it gets turned into a proper medieval priory, but we don't seem to have that here.
But how can we prove all that?
Well, the main problem we've got is there's a church and the churchyard in the middle of the area we'd really like to look at. You know, it's quite likely there's a lot of stuff under here. We're not allowed to do that. So what we can do is come in as close as we can, because the area that was occupied by the monastery is almost certainly bigger than the area occupied by the church and the churchyard.
Understand, yeah.
So the church and the church, I feel like, are a retreat from the likely maximum extent of the monastery.
But we need some targets to look at. Stuart's survey of the earthworks around the church has thrown up some interesting results. Here's the church. There's a medieval moated site just here. But there's also a whole other system of earthworks. This seems to be a roadway from the river heading straight towards the church. There also seems to be a large platform at the top of it, and off to the side is a large lump in the ground, another platform. It looks like it could be a boundary ditch of some sort, so we put a trench just here to see if it is. We also now have some geophysics results for this area here, the orchard field right next to the church. Have you geophysed the whole field?
We've only managed to do a quarter because of all the trees, but look, we've got some really nice results. The high resistance in black is what we're normally interested in, but look at these low resistance rectilinear white responses.
What might that be?
It looks like a building, doesn't it?
Well, it could be robbed out walls. The thing is, they're also aligned with the church.
Why do you say what could be so significant about that?
Well, if the present church is on the site of a monastic church, then these could be monastic buildings going with it.
We've got to dig it, haven't we?
Well, we certainly have, yeah.
Well, what I think we should do is actually put a couple of test pits to get the bigger picture if Mick's right.
And I think we can, at least we'll get an idea of what those are representing before we start bigger.
And any fines associated with them.
I suppose it could just be a load of Victorian bottles.
Yeah.
Well, he'll find out.
Once you've dug your test
Once
pit.
I did.
Phil opens the first of 2 test pits in the orchard. John keeps an eye on things.
I would help you, you know, but...
No, you wouldn't. You've
the
never
first
done
bit
so
of work
before.
you've done today, so...
Hey? When was the last time you did any?
I've been working all morning.
But you don't know what work is, John. All you do is walk up and down like with a supermarket trolley.
Look out for the crocuses.
Back in the village, we've really gone as far as we can in number 20. This was where we found Saxon material. But now, as we go deeper, all we're getting is medieval, and even later.
Probably Victorian.
Clearly, this ground has been turned over, so there's nothing more to be gained by digging here. We close it down. In one of the test pits closer to the church, we've also hit the bottom. And we've got an interesting find here.
What's nice here is we can see two distinct phases of archaeology. We've got the later wall, which looks to be 18th century handmade bricks running down the garden, and they're overlying straight on top of this earlier cobbled surface, which contains 15th century and therefore probably dates to that point too.
It's marvellous to see this. I had no idea anything existed like this.
Absolutely.
It's, you know, it's wonderful to see it.
The problem with this, though, again, is that it doesn't really take us any earlier than medieval. So what can the pottery we found tell us?
I've laid some of the finds from the test pits out, sort of in chronological order, give you an idea what's going on. We've got the Romans down there all on their own, then a great big gap here.
This is the black hole of 400 years.
Yeah, this is the early and middle Saxon, say 450 to 850 AD. There's nothing so far. And then we arrive at the late Saxon. Now, when we're saying late Saxon, I suppose what we really mean is Viking age, 850 through into the 10th century. Then we've got this stuff, which is all the Norman period stuff, 11th to 12th century.
So those people who were saying that this is a medieval settlement, we've proved that that's wrong. We've got a lot of Norman stuff.
Yeah, we've got Norman and we've got pre-Norman, so I think from the pottery we've got here, there's very little doubt that there was a settlement here in the Norman times.
The pottery we found proves that there were people living in and around Nether Poppleton right through the medieval period and right back to the 11th century. That part of the village occupied by houses was laid out in the medieval period, but there was already a Norman community living here. So we closed down all the test pits in the village. They've answered that question. The big question, though, was there an earlier settlement still stands? Our only chance now of finding anything earlier lies in what we find close to the church. That monastery that Mick's besotted with is our only hope of pushing this village history back any further. Raksha thinks she may have something, but is it good enough for Paul?
What's going on here, then?
Well...
Oh.
We've got a piece of pottery.
Yeah.
Well, I'm quite excited. I think it's quite early.
Yeah? Oh, dear. Well, it could be. I mean, certainly looking at the geology of it, you've got these big lumps of quartz sticking out of it. It's kind of typical of the late Saxon and the Saxo-Norman pottery you get around here. I mean, it could conceivably be even earlier, but it's very battered, and I wouldn't like to sort of really try and give too close a date to it, you know?
Are you being rude about my pottery, though?
No, I mean, it's a nice start, but it would be nice if you get some bigger bits.
I'll try my best then.
OK.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This trench could be very important. There's a big ditch here, and if it is Saxon, it could help determine whether there was a monastic settlement here at that time. But if there was one, what are we looking for?
So what would it have been like, this monastery?
Well, it's difficult to answer that because so few of them have been excavated. You know, so few of them do we know anything about. But the little bits that we do know, I mean, probably the best thing is to try and draw you a sort of sketch of them. A lot of the time, they're on promontories. Very often there's a chunk of land sticking out with marshes around it, or a river next to it, something like that. And they cut off that promontory with a ditch that cuts off the monastic area from the rest. And then, because the most important thing, there's often more than one church, and they're often in line like that. So I've put a couple in there.
Why did they do that?
We don't know, to be honest. I think part of it is just structural. They couldn't put a really big building up. And then, because often monasteries at that date are mixed communities of men and women. Nuns, priests to serve the nuns, and then often with an abbess. We must have been formidable ladies, actually, over the top of everybody. So we need some sort of dormitory area, refectory area, something like that. And let's have some priests with similar accommodation nearby, kitchens, all that sort of stuff going with it. And there's always guests. And those guests, in some cases, will be the aristocratic families and the royal families. So let's put in a big sort of guest hall over here with facilities going with that. And then often they're down by a river and they're bringing supplies in by a river. So in the end, it can start to look like almost like a small town, sort of complexes of buildings. but very, very irregular and nothing like your Fountains Abbey or your Tintern Abbey that we think of as monasteries later on.
Right next to the church, we've found something a little strange. So we ask an architectural historian to have a look at it.
It's limestone, which is the kind of stone you would use for architectural details on buildings. Problem is we can't quite see enough of it at the moment to
definitely
see what it is. I would guess, judging by the moulding so far, that it's 13th century in origin, but
13th century.
But we really need to see a lot more of it. It's a rather strange find, really. One would hope it's from the church to make the story uncomplicated, but if it's from another building, it all gets very interesting indeed.
This will clearly need to be investigated a little further. Over in the orchard, Phil's also got a strange find.
You got anything over there? Well, I'm down in the deepest bit. I'm down to about 80 centimetres. Yeah. I've got two nice bits of early medieval pottery. Yeah. And I think I've got a pair of legs down here.
Pair of legs?
I think they're legs.
You sure they're not roots? All I've had is loads and loads of roots and worms and stuff down here.
No, I think they're legs. They seem to have marrow in the middle. I'm sure it's legs.
I'm not down on the natural yet, so I'm going to keep hauling down here, and maybe I'll find a pair of arms or something like that to go with it.
Doesn't look much like just a simple field wall.
And on the other side of the orchard, there are a few bricks sticking out of the ground which Ian has started to explore a bit. And they are intriguing.
It's looking quite substantial, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's some bricks tumbling off it down this way, but it's going on down. It's pretty solid. Here.
It makes you wonder whether it is just an orchard wall then.
Well, it could be, but for an orchard, it's a very big wall.
Remember I said to you what a long shot it was to get at that early Saxon period? Well, I think the odds have just shortened on it because of what we found in this ditch.
What you got, Rocha?
Found a larger bit of pottery. Do you know what date that is, Paul?
Oh yeah, that's a bit more like it. I mean, that's pre-Viking, that's Saxon, AD 450 to 850. I mean, that's what we've been looking for, really.
Where did you find it?
Found it more or less at the bottom of this ditch on the side, which is great, which means it's from the early phase of this ditch.
So that means we've got a Saxon ditch?
Well, it looks like it, doesn't it? The pottery is the right date. We've got the ditch coming through here. It's near the bottom. It must be near when it was dug.
But a ditch isn't the most exciting thing in the world, is it?
Well, when it comes to Saxon ditches in the pre-Viking period, yes, there's only three things you tend to get them round. A royal centre, a trading centre or a monastery. So it can only be one of these three things.
And what we're looking for here is a monastery, so it seems to fit.
What do you reckon the significance of that ditch is?
Well, I think it's fantastic. It could be the vallum round the edge of a monastic enclosure.
What's a vallum?
It's a big ditch which defines the religious area from the world outside. Yeah. It's fantastic.
Why do you say that?
Because it's big, it's broad, it's exactly the sort of thing you expect to find, and you can trace it in earthwork form going down there and going back that way, heading back towards the church. So I think it's fantastic.
OK, so we've got one piece of Saxon pottery and a little bit of ditch.
Well, no, because we've got another piece of Saxon pottery. Emma's just found that in her feature down that end of the trench, and Phil's got a piece out of the churchyard as well.
So it's all coming together in the last hour or so, beginning to get the evidence, the boundary around it. It's all starting to come together.
You're quite excited, aren't you?
I think it's fantastic. just what I thought we'd never find.
So tomorrow, could we find Mick's missing monastery?
God, I hope so.
Yesterday evening we found an old ditch and some ancient pottery down there which seemed to be clues as to the location of Mick's missing Anglo-Saxon monastery. But this being Time Team, things are never as easy as they seem, and this morning Stuart's found something entirely different which has set us herring off in a totally different direction. Stuart, after 12 years on Time Team, even I know that is not Saxon archaeology.
Well, that's a phase of Saxon you've never seen before.
What were you doing here?
Well, what we've got here is a series of regular earthworks. There's a regular layout of them which we're interested in. We want to know what they were. And there's a piece of wall exposed. Can you see that there?
Yeah, yeah.
So we put a trench here to see what it was, and look, we've got this really well-built brick wall. It's got what appear to be Tudor bricks in it, and it's just sitting there.
What do you think it might be?
Well, we've actually put another hole in over there.
Yeah.
And we've got lots of building rubble, tile, all the debris from a collapsed building. I think we've probably got here an unknown Tudor building, which I knew absolutely nothing about before.
Really unknown?
Completely. I mean, I've walked over this field more times than I care to remember with dozens of other people, and we've walked past that wall, and the idea of a Tudor mansion just hasn't popped into our minds. And yet when you look at the aerial photographs, when you listen to Stuart talking about it, it's quite clear that we've got this regular platform surrounded by these intricate earthworks that do seem to indicate a previously unknown Tudor house with this garden around it.
We've only got one day left. What can we do about it?
Well, I think the important thing here is to decide, are we inside a house, are we outside the house? So dig this trench, see if we can identify floor levels or yard levels here, and take the trench back into the orchard over there. Again, see if we've got yard levels or indeed floor levels.
So we've got an Anglo-Saxon monastery and a Tudor mansion and just one day left.
It's big trouble, I think, yes.
Even when you know there's something under the ground, you don't always find it. To have stumbled across a Tudor mansion no one had ever heard of is very rare indeed. This is where the wall is, at the back of the orchard. The building rubble is here. We open another trench here to see if we can find more wall. These are the earthworks, which look like some sort of raised platform. John geophysed this area yesterday, so we re-examine the results to see if this new discovery makes any sense.
I can't actually see a clear building plan here. We've certainly got what might be structure on that side.
Yeah.
There that Ian's digging.
Yeah.
Kerry's wall at that point there, and behind us on the bank.
Yeah.
What I'm not sure is whether this is a terrace, a garden terrace,
yeah,
or whether we're actually in the building and any walls have been stripped away.
Yeah. And I suppose that depends on the plan of it. If it was a series of ranges, then we would be in a garden.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was more of a block, then we'd be in the middle of it here, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So you're suggesting we need something across here to test that?
The earthworks, according to Stuart, suggest that that might be the front of the house. We've got responses that go with those earthworks. I think if we put a trench across, we can establish whether it's a garden terrace or the front.
OK. So you've pegged it out and we go have a look at that?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at that first and see where we go from there, eh?
We also look at other things in a different light. It turns out that this column we found yesterday also has Tudor bricks in it, so it could have been part of the foundations of the Tudor house. And in this garden, just behind where the wall was found, there are lots of little lumps and bumps that, with our new view of what might be happening, could be leftover walls. So our architectural historian is helping us to plot them out.
So we should map them so we can see how they relate to the earthworks.
Yeah, if you look up towards the north there, can you see there's that slope in the ground?
Oh yeah, there's a drop off down there. Yeah.
And then it runs straight towards us.
Okay.
Where we're stood, in fact, and then it returns at that point.
There's a corner just there, that way, doesn't it?
That's right.
Once we put the information on a map, it may show us the outline of the Tudor building.
Okay, so just walk straight to you.
Yeah. I'll walk up to the next corner.
Okay, I've got that. Okay. I've got that. So if I plot that up on the computer, see how it relates to the earthworks and everything else.
While the hunt for the Tudor building continues, we're also looking for evidence of a monastic settlement around the church. We still want to find it. Stuart thinks he has an idea of where it could have been.
See down below us where the trench is?
Yeah.
That's cut across a line of a ditch which goes straight up there and leads straight towards the churchyard.
So it's going beyond the churchyard wall down there?
Well, I would suspect so. You can't see any trace of it in the churchyard.
No.
But it actually comes along from there, down below us, heads towards that pylon there in the distance. But it does a right angle across the field there.
You see where that greener grass is across there?
It's just a bit beyond that. There's actually quite a dip when you get down there.
Right.
And then on the aerial photograph and in the earthworks, you can actually see a ditch heading down towards the river. See where the low ground is, down there?
Yeah.
Well, that's where there's a series of fish ponds now, probably to do with the manor house.
See the bottom of the slope in front of us?
It is, but what that dip is and why they've used it as fish ponds is because it's an old river channel coming through there.
Ah, right.
So that might be the sort of former edge of the river in the Saxon period. So I think what this monastic enclosure is doing is it's coming along here, doing a right angle, heading down to the river.
Yeah.
Potentially where it is over that side, obviously the church is there, which you'd expect
You'd
to be
expect that to be in it, wouldn't you? Yeah, yeah.
And to me, it looks as if the other edge of it is going to be where the village is separated from.
So
from
where
here.
the big hedges and the big trees is where it's getting back towards the river again.
That's right. I mean, it's almost like the field that we're in.
Yeah.
Apart from a small bit at that far end, is the the monastic enclosure. It gives you that that sense of isolation that I know you like with monasteries.
Well, that's right. Yeah, it's almost on a promontory sticking eastwards, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, that's absolutely ideal.
This is the area described by Stuart. It's the edge of the monastic enclosure, with the church inside it and the edge of the village forming one side to it. It's a huge site, but entirely what one might expect. Mick's happy with it. Back on the ground, Phil has removed the legs, they were from a dog, and he's got some more good news for Mick.
Phil, that is not a 1x1 test pit.
No, it's a 2x2 test pit, actually.
It started out as a 1x1.
Exactly.
So why did you extend it?
Because of what we found in here. I mean, look, we've got this feature, what looks like possibly a shallow pit. And it's not merely the fact that we got a pit down there, it's what we got out of it.
Is that Saxon?
Yeah, it's this 450 to 850 Middle Saxon stuff.
So does that mean that this feature, whatever it is Saxon?
It could be. You've got to be a little bit careful because we've also had early medieval pottery from there as well. But the thing that we have not had is late pottery or any post-medieval pottery. So, in other words, I'm fairly convinced that that feature has got to be early medieval at the latest.
Mick, have we any idea what that is?
Well, I don't think we have at this stage, and this is one reason for extending the trench, isn't
Exactly.
it? But it
exactly.
is the sort of thing you expect on these sort of Saxon sites, where they've put timbers in the floor or posts or something like that. And look how close to the church we are.
Yeah, yeah.
We're right in the area you would expect activity at that time.
So what are you going to do with this now?
We'll just take it on down, try and find out what this feature is to enlarge the trench.
We've got a lot to do today, haven't we?
We have, yeah, but this is coming on. We might even have a go at this one later on as well. It's got the same sort of thing in the bottom of it.
The hunt for the Tudor house is going well. Kerry is cleaning up the main part of the wall. Some locals are helping expose more of it, while we're beginning to think that the material in this trench is to the front of the house. And Henry's now pulling together the bigger picture from the lumps and bumps he plotted. So what would it have looked like?
Well, judging by the fragments that we've turned up so far, we would have had a range at the back which would have contained the hall, some ranges coming off either side, which might have contained chambers and such like, an entrance into that courtyard, and then an outer courtyard where all the service buildings would have been, and including, perhaps, this building, the barn.
So we are looking at a complex of buildings?
Oh, yes, quite an extensive site, yes.
Everyone's saying we didn't even know there was a Tudor building there before. Is that right?
Well, bizarrely, yes, it is. The only references we have are sort of rumours, if you like, in Victorian histories. You see here, there's a reference here to the manor house. Now, that's the current manor house that's still standing. And it says here that that was built out of the remains of the ancient seat of the Huttons, the old house. That's the reference to an older house that was used to build the existing one. But we had nothing more definite than that about it before now.
As we uncover more of the walls, we begin to get a clearer picture of this Tudor house. The evidence points to it being very big. The front wall runs from here to here. The earthworks in the orchard suggest that it extended right back to here. And the thickness of the walls suggests that it was a couple of stories high. It was a prestigious place. Stuart took me on a tour of the front of it.
If I'm a visitor to the Tudor house, why am I coming up this way rather than from the road?
Well, this is where the privileged visitors would arrive, the high-status visitors. You wouldn't want to come in past all the peasants, basically.
So what can I see over here?
You'd see ornamental ponds, little waterscape just out there you can walk round.
And over there?
In this enclosure here, you'd have trees, ornamental orchard-type trees, and they'd be screening what was the old moat. By the time you got to this point here, what you'd see in front of you is this grand facade of this new Tudor house.
So presumably that's the whole point of the grand walk-up.
It is. It's showing off. It's showing off to you as a visitor. This is its display side over here.
And if you look out from the house...
Well, what you've got looking this way is an open landscape.
It's a hell of a view, isn't it?
It is. It's private and it's privileged. You can't see the village, you can't see the peasants. You've got ponds, river, open landscape, orchards, ornamental gardens. Very show-off, very Tudor.
And this is what this enormous complex would have looked like. This was an impressive building dominating the landscape, with its own entrance to the church and to the river. Out in Phil's trench, he's now reached the bottom of this feature. The Saxon pottery he found came from the other side of the trench. But what does this side tell us?
So what do you reckon? What have we got out of this now?
Well, not quite what we expected, Mick.
Right.
You remember on the geophysics, there was that white line, which
Very
we
clear,
thought was going to be a beam slot, a building, that sort of thing. Well, there's no way that this is a building. This is a massive ditch. It's going to come out, what, at least that size.
Well, I was going to say, because you've only got one half, haven't you? The other half going to be over here somewhere.
And have you got any dating for that ditch?
Yep, we've had pottery from about the Norman Conquest right through to about the 14th century. It's within those sort of 300 or 400 years.
Yeah.
And I think that what we're looking at is activity here in the early medieval period at the same period as that church starts to be built.
So what do you think we have got here?
I think it's probably something to do with, well, the Norman period, you know. The church is all of that sort of date and later. We'd expect some sort of manor house to go with it, probably somewhere in this area, if not down on the moated mound. And this is one of the land divisions associated with that.
The main thing is, I think, that we've actually got people living around here, which of course you don't have now.
Up on the top of the hill here.
If you look at it now, there's just one house here. There's no village at all. In those days, this would have been thriving.
But what of Mick's missing monastery here at the east end of the village around the church? Do we have any evidence for that? Well, we do.
Why they've used it as fish ponds is because it's an old river channel coming through there.
The Saxon ditch we found is most likely, in this instance, to have been from a monastic settlement. The church seems to have been built on the site of a former church or monastery. Its dedication to a saint who died 400 years earlier is an important clue. And the topography on a promontory is similar to that of many other monastic sites.
Privy shape, really.
So now we just have to explain all of this to the people of Poppleton. What can we tell them after 3 days of exploring?
Mick, can I borrow you a minute? Yeah. So we've got Anglo-Saxon here, Anglo-Saxon here.
Yeah, we must have some sort of hamlet here.
Well, to begin with, they were right. Their village is older than it looks. This pottery shows us that there was occupation here in Norman times and in Saxon times. In the Saxon period, there was an enormous enclosure surrounding a monastic settlement. It would have had a church as the centrepiece, houses, and a few workshops. The promontory it's situated on is perfect. Easy access to York and a bit of height to give it some security. In Norman times, the present church was built, and a settlement grew up around it. And then, 300 or 400 years later, an enormous Tudor mansion dominates this part of the landscape. This is something no one had expected to find. Like so many other places, it's a story of 1,000 years of history on the doorstep. So for the people of Nether Poppleton, is their job now done? Well, no.
A huge Tudor mansion was a bit of a surprise. The good news is that because of what we've discovered, you're going to be really busy for years to come. Thanks for having us.